Chapter 6:10. The 10th day. Early in the morning. According to the almanac, today was not a good day. Master, it's already the 10th day. Yi Fan is on the verge of death. If I go later, I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on. In the Three Pristines Temple, the little Taoist boy knelt in front of Qingqunzi, who was meditating cross-legged, and said anxiously. Qingqunzi, who was sitting on the futon, closed his eyes and looked calm. He turned a deaf ear to the little Taoist boy's words. Master! The little Taoist boy kowtowed heavily on the ground and said loudly, I beg you, let me go! When Yi Fan was taken away by Gesang Dorje with the golden alms bowl, he had already sensed that Yi Fan was in trouble. He could sense that Yi Fan was in trouble, let alone Qingqunzi. However, Qingqunzi didn't care about Yi Fan's trouble at all. It was as if he didn't know about it. After learning about the demon-slaying conference, the little Taoist boy couldn't hold it in anymore. He asked Qingqunzi to go and rescue Yi Fan. However, he didn't expect that Qingqunzi would flatly refuse his request. Although the little Taoist boy didn't understand why Qingqunzi did this, he couldn't disobey his master's order. Since Qingqunzi didn't agree, the little Taoist boy didn't dare to go out without permission. However, last night, the usually calm and dreamless little Taoist boy had a very realistic nightmare. He was so shocked that he suddenly sat up on the bed and sweated profusely. In the dream, Yi Fan was tied to a huge pillar with 8 golden chains around his body. His eyes were gone, his arms were broken, and his face was badly mutilated. He didn't even look like a human anymore. He looked straight at little Taoist boy with a pair of bloody holes and didn't say a word. After waking up, the little Taoist boy didn't have time to think. He calculated Yi Fan's situation according to the time of the dream. However, when he saw the result of the calculation, the Taoist boy's eyes turned red. Everything in the dream was real. He lifted the blanket, changed into a Taoist robe, and carried the sword on his back. He went straight to find Qingqunzi. What surprised him was that Qingqunzi, who was supposed to be resting in the bedroom, was not in the room. The bedding on the bed was neat and tidy, as if it had not been touched at all. He searched around the Purple Sun shrine and finally found Qingqunzi, who was sitting cross-legged and reciting Tao scriptures in the brightly lit Three Purities Hall. The Taoist boy knelt down in front of Qingqunzi without saying a word. To him, there was no need to say anything. Qingqunzi already knew everything. No matter what he was doing, what he was thinking, even if it was just a fleeting thought, Qingqunzi knew everything. The master and disciple duo sat cross-legged and recited the scriptures silently, while the other knelt on the ground and remained motionless until dawn. Seeing that the time of Yi Fan's execution was getting closer and closer, the Taoist boy could no longer hold it in, so he begged Qingqunzi. Seeing the Taoist boy's sincere words, Qingqunzi, who was meditating with his eyes closed, said calmly, It's not that I don't want you to go, but Yi Fan's 10 days of suffering are not over yet. If you go to rescue him now, you will not be able to hold back and attack him. In that case, you will only interfere with karma and will not benefit you. Today is the 10th day. Why do you say that his 10 days of suffering are not over yet? The kneeling Taoist boy heard his master speak and immediately asked. The time is not up yet. Qingqunzi said. The time is not up yet? The Taoist boy asked in surprise, How much longer? Qingqunzi opened his eyes and slowly stood up. He took out 3 incense sticks from the incense holder on the table and lit them on the candlestick. Then, he bowed to the statues of the 3 purities and inserted the incense sticks into the incense burner. When these incense sticks burn out, Yi Fan's 10 days of suffering will be over. Qingqunzi said as he turned around and walked to the Taoist boy. He reached out and helped him up. At that time, you can go and help him. Thank you, master. The Taoist boy suddenly understood and bowed to Qingqunzi. It was not that Qingqunzi did not want him to rescue Yi Fan, but he was afraid that he would be swayed by his emotions and interfere with karma, which would damage his merit. Remember, you are going to rescue him on behalf of the Purple Sun Temple. You should follow the rules of Tao. Do not act recklessly. Otherwise, I will not forgive you, Qing Chenzi said as he removed the 5-colored jade token from his waist and handed it to the Taoist boy. Don't worry, master. I will remember. The Taoist boy took the Purple Sun Decree with both hands and said solemnly. Qing Chenzi put his hands behind his back and slowly left the 3 Purities temple. The Taoist boy kept the token and stared at the 3 incense sticks in the incense burner, hoping that the incense sticks would burn out as soon as possible. Sect Master, when are we leaving? In the Dojin Palace, Succubus, who was dressed in a black robe and had a delicate face, asked Cui Ziwen, who was standing in front of the crystal window with his back facing her. It's not time yet. Cui Ziwen, who was dressed in a black robe with golden threads, looked at the drizzle outside the window and said calmly. Succubus frowned after hearing this. Have you prepared the things I asked you to bring? Cui Ziwen asked. Sect Master, I have brought the purple jade blood ointment that the king of Persia gave you and the 9 revolutions creation elixir that the state preceptor of Wu Peng country gave you, but... Succubus stopped talking. But what? Cui Ziwen asked. Aren't we going to rescue Yi Fan? Why do we have to bring these things? Succubus asked in confusion. She had gone out with Cui Ziwen to run errands more than 10 times, but this was the first time she had brought the holy healing elixir with her. Yi Fan's injuries aren't light right now, so we'll need it later, Cui Ziwen said. Yi Fan is injured? When the succubus heard Cui Ziwen's words, her beautiful eyes immediately widened and she asked in shock. She only knew that Yi Fan had been restrained by a Tibetan Buddhist expert with a magical weapon and was about to execute him today. She didn't expect that Yi Fan was already seriously injured. In her opinion, the Buddhist expert was a benevolent and kind person, so they definitely wouldn't abuse their authority to punish. Yes, Cui Ziwen responded. Is his injury serious? Is his life in danger? Succubus asked. His injury is very serious. Cui Ziwen looked out of the window and said. Succubus' heart instantly sank. Cui Ziwen always spoke casually, and no matter how serious the matter was, it was like child's play to him. Now, he had personally said that Yi Fan's injury was very serious, and his tone was very serious. He even paused for a moment. This could only mean one thing, and that was that Yi Fan's injury was very dangerous. Succubus' eyes reddened when she thought of how Yi Fan was willing to be humiliated in order to save her from Qi Yao. When we see Yi Fan later, you're only responsible for treating his injuries. Don't interfere with anything else. Cui Ziwen said to Succubus with his hands behind his back, We'll set off in 1 hour. Yes, sect leader. Succubus blinked and replied in the open space of the Ganlu temple. The prayer flags fluttered and the Dharma flags fluttered. Yi Fan, who was tied to the 8 extreme Dharma pillars, had his head lowered. His dirty silver hair covered his face that was full of blisters and badly mangled flesh. On his shoulders, the bones and wounds that were neatly arranged were a ghastly sight that made one's scalp go numb. On the ground below the Dharma pillars, a large pool of scarlet blood had completely solidified and turned black. 2 ghastly white severed arms were frozen on top of the blood clot. It was a sight that made one's heart tremble and unable to look straight at. Outside the venue, countless Tibetans who had heard the news and came to participate in the demon-slaying conference looked at Yi Fan from afar while pointing and whispering. A few of them were bold enough to pick up a few stones and throw them at Yi Fan from afar. As they did so, they cursed Yi Fan in Tibetan. In their eyes, Yi Fan was a demon, a complete demon. It was a great blessing to be able to witness a demon being killed with their own eyes. Gesang Dorji and the 8 Yin-Yang masters who were sitting on the tall Dharma platform looked at the scene in front of them with a smile on their faces. They drank the steaming hot butter tea in their hands contentedly. Behind them, more than 300 enemies of Eldritch from his previous life were staring at Yi Fan with evil smiles on their faces. They were all holding weapons and staring at him on the Dharma pillars. They couldn't wait to pounce on him and tear him into pieces. Eldritch's eyes were destroyed, his arms were broken, his hamstrings were torn, his cultivation was lost, his treasures were stolen, and he was imprisoned. No matter how capable he was, the famous Eldritch was now a cripple. Not to mention these people, even if it was just a child, any one of the Tibetan onlookers would be able to take his life. Patter! A stone in the hand of a Tibetan hit Yi Fan on the head. Yi Fan, who had fainted, was gradually awakened by this blow. He slowly raised his head. His silver hair that was stuck together by pus and blood slowly separated, revealing his horrifying empty bloody eye sockets and his ugly face with pus and blood flowing out. Boom! The crowd let out a cry of alarm and suddenly retreated. After Yi Fan heard the voices of the crowd, he lowered his head again. He could no longer see anything. The cold air and the noisy crowd made Yi Fan understand that the demon-slaying conference was about to begin. I didn't expect him to be injured to this extent. In the crowd, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was wearing a felt hat and a Tibetan robe, whispered in surprise when he saw Yi Fan on the Dharma pillars. If it weren't for the silver hair, Matsumoto Takeyoshi almost couldn't recognize that this person was Yi Fan, who had already joined the demon path and whose cultivation defied the heavens. The Han people have an old saying, "A dragon in the shallows will be teased by shrimps, a tiger in the plains will be bullied by dogs." It seems that today is the day of his death. The tall Sasaki, who was holding a saber in his hand, whispered to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Beside him, Akichi Miyamoto frowned and didn't say anything. The three of them had carefully dressed up in order to participate in this demon-slaying conference. The tall Sasaki put on makeup to look like an old Tibetan with a hunched back and a face full of beard. He hid his huge and slender saber in a thick wooden crutch. Akichi Miyamoto, who was wearing a black heavy armor from head to toe, was wearing a loose Tibetan robe, a huge felt hat, and a scarf covering his face. He looked out through the gaps of the scarf. The state preceptor of this dynasty, Master Lu of Mao Mountain, has arrived. As the gatekeeper outside the venue shouted, Lu Yuanshan, who was wearing a golden Taoist robe, slowly walked in from outside the venue. With his left hand behind his back and his right arm raised, he walked toward the spell platform in high spirit. Behind him, the savage zombie king, who was wearing an apricot yellow Taoist robe, followed closely behind him with an expressionless face. Matsumoto Takeyoshi coldly looked at the arrogant Lu Yuanshan with a gloomy look in his eyes. As soon as he heard that the state preceptor of this dynasty had arrived, Gesang Dorji, who was sitting in the center of the spell platform, hurriedly left his seat and brought the 8 yin-yang disciples and the 300 eldritch enemies to Lu Yuanshan. This old monk, Gesang Dorji, greets the state preceptor. Gesang Dorji put his palms together and bowed to Lu Yuanshan. The 8 yin-yang disciples greet the state preceptor. The head of the 8 yin-yang disciples, Tian Qian, waved his horsetail whisk and bowed to Lu Yuanshan. They were all Taoists, so they naturally greeted him with Taoist etiquette. ********* Chapter 611. I'm here today as the Maoshan sect leader. This has nothing to do with the imperial court, Lu Yuanshan said to the crowd with a smile. Master Gesang, please rise. Fellow Taoists, please rise. He was very pleased with the respect everyone was showing him. On the surface, he appeared to be modest and polite, but in reality, he was overjoyed and overjoyed. He only had one purpose in attending the demon-slaying conference, and that was to use this unprecedented spiritual conference to show his face. He wanted to let all the heroes and sects know that he was not only the Maoshan sect leader, but also the imperial court's imperial advisor. He was second only to one person. The imperial advisor is low-key and magnanimous. I'm impressed, Gesang Duji said as he extended his hand toward the spiritual platform. Please, Imperial Advisor. Master, please. Lu Yuanshan smiled. The two of them walked side by side toward the spiritual platform as they spoke. The 8 yin-yang disciples and the 300 enemies automatically made way for them with respectful looks on their faces. Although Lu Yuanshan said that he was attending the spiritual conference as the Maoshan sect leader, his status as the imperial advisor was still respected. No one dared to be disrespectful. Big brother, there seems to be something wrong with the person following behind Lu Yuanshan. The sharp-eyed Di Kuan rushed to Tianqian's side and whispered into his ear. I've already seen through what you said, Tianqian said to Di Kuan as he looked at Lu Yuanshan and his disciple. However, this has nothing to do with us. Our goal is to get rid of Eldritch. We don't care about anything else. Di Kuan nodded slowly. Is this person the reincarnation of Eldritch? Lu Yuanshan asked with a frown as he led the crowd to the 8 extreme spell pillars and looked at Yi Fan, who was tortured beyond recognition. The severity of the punishment the person in front of him had been subjected to made him slightly surprised. Sect leader Lu is right. This person is the reincarnation of Eldritch, Gesang Duji replied. Lu Yuanshan raised his head and looked at the golden Buddha treasure bowl floating above Yi Fan's head. He then looked at the 8 extreme spell pillars behind Yi Fan and nodded slightly. No wonder they were able to capture this Eldritch. Turned out that they had the help of magic tools. Master's Dharma is superb. The people of Tibet can be said to be bathed in Buddha's grace, Lu Yuanshan said to Gesang Dorji with a smile. Sect Master Lu is too polite. Please come in. Gesang Dorji continued to invite Lu Yuanshan inside. Lu Yuanshan smiled and followed Gesang Dorji onto the 30-feet-tall platform. After a series of pretentious excuses, Lu Yuanshan sat next to Gesang Dorji. This was the Tibetan area. Almost everyone believed in Buddhism. The Dharma assembly was held in front of the Sweet Dew Temple. Although he was the great Ming state preceptor, he was still a Taoist after all. If he sat on the main seat, it would be unreasonable. Moreover, Eldritch was captured by Gesang Dorji. Gesang Dorji was the main character. While drinking the fragrant butter tea, he asked Gesang Dorji about the customs of the Tibetan people, pretending to be sympathetic to the people. After all, he was now the state preceptor of the Great Ming. His status was different from before. Gesang Dorji answered carefully, not daring to neglect. The Savage Corpse King's incarnation, Dao Xian, stood quietly behind Lu Yuanshan, looking at Yi Fan on the 8 extreme spell pillars expressionlessly. He was the Millennial Corpse King. He had heard about Eldritch's incident. Looking at Yi Fan, who had lost all his cultivation and was tortured, he felt a little uncomfortable. To be honest, he admired what Eldritch had done in the past. He appreciated Eldritch's crazy and unruly character very much and sympathized with him. He had always wanted to meet Eldritch, but he never had a chance. When he was alive, he was deep in the wilderness, dealing with the affairs of the country and had no time to spare. After he died, he turned into the Savage Corpse King and hid in the dark all day, living a life of savagery. It was even more impossible for him to meet Eldritch. Now, he finally met Eldritch, who was rumored to have heaven-defying strength, but he didn't expect to see him on such an occasion. He didn't expect that Eldritch, who even the immortals of the heaven realm couldn't do anything about back then, would fall into such a situation now. It really made him sigh. He had lost half of his corpse core and was living under someone else's roof. It was already hard enough, but compared to Eldritch, he was already living in happiness. That Lu Yuanshan, who let him come? In the crowd outside the venue, a young man dressed as a scholar frowned and asked an old man beside him. This person had a dignified appearance and looked like Buffon. Although he was disguised, he still couldn't hide his noble aura. He was none other than the current crown prince. Looking at Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting high on the ritual platform with a smug face, He was a little dissatisfied. Your Highness, you don't know. Although he is already the current imperial advisor, he is still the Maoshan sect leader, the old man dressed as a servant said. Spiritual gatherings like the demon-slaying conference have always been attended by the various sect leaders to show that they are subduing demons and promoting justice. This old man was the Crown Prince's special technique expert. On this trip to Tibet, he was in charge of the Crown Prince's daily life and personal guard. Where are our people? Has everything been arranged? The Crown Prince asked the old man in a low voice. Everything has been arranged, the old man replied. Gunpowder has been buried under the ground 100 feet around Yifan. More than 30 experts have all disguised themselves and are scattered in the crowd. As long as there is a chance, I will send out a secret signal to detonate the gunpowder and let them take advantage of the chaos to save him. The Crown Prince nodded slowly. Just as the Crown Prince and the old eunuch were discussing how to rescue Yifan, the gatekeeper at the door shouted, Zhang Xiaoyang, the sect leader of Jingyi, and Yu Xingchen, the sect leader of Chuanjin, have arrived. Gesang Dorji, who was talking to Lu Yuanshan, heard that Zhang Xiaoyang of Longhu Mountain and Yu Xingchen of Chuanjin sect had arrived. He stood up again and went down the stairs to welcome them. The 8 yin-yang disciples followed closely behind. Jingyi, Chuanjin, and Maoshan were known as the 3 major sects of Taoism, especially Jingyi sect, which was the leader of Taoism. Naturally, they didn't dare to slight them. Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting in his seat, narrowed his eyes and drank his tea quietly. According to the rules, he should also stand up to welcome them. After all, Jingyi and Chuanjin sect's status in Taoism was higher than his Maoshan. However, that was all in the past. Now that he was the imperial preceptor, his status was respected. As a result, the status of the Maoshan sect naturally skyrocketed. It was no longer the same as before. At the entrance of the venue, 2 Taoists in gold-threaded robes slowly walked in. The Taoist on the left was 8 feet tall, handsome, and chiseled. His eyes were like torches. He was Zhang Xiaoyang, the sect leader of Jingyi sect of Longhu Mountain. The Taoist on the right had dark eyebrows, starry eyes, and a handsome face. He was none other than Yu Xingchen, the sect leader of Chuanjin sect. Zhang Xiaoyang cursed in a low voice as he walked in. What bad luck! I saw that Lu guy as soon as I came in. He's the imperial preceptor now. You should keep a low profile. Yu Xingchen, who was walking side by side with Zhang Xiaoyang, advised Zhang Xiaoyang, it doesn't matter if you offend him, but Jingyi sect will suffer. Zhang Xiaoyang snorted and glanced at Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan looked at Zhang Xiaoyang coldly and drank his tea quietly. He was no longer the old Lu Yuanshan. Not only was he the imperial preceptor now, but his cultivation was also incomparable to before. Celestial Master Zhang, sect leader Yu. Gesang Duoji, who came to the door, greeted Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen. He had once met the 2 of them. At that time, the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty had once held a Buddhist prayer assembly, gathering the abbot of all the famous temples and Taoist temple masters to pray for the prosperity of the country. It was also at that assembly that he met the 2 famous Taoist masters in Jianghu. Master Gesang, Zhang Xiaoyang, and Yu Xingchen stopped and greeted Gesang Duoji. The 8 yin-yang masters greet the 2 sect leaders. Tian Qian, along with the other 7 disciples, bowed to the 2 as a Taoist. The Zhengyi sect and the Chuanjin sect were famous Taoist sects with orthodox lineages. The 8 of them did not dare to slight them. The 8 yin-yang masters? Tian Qian's words made Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen frown and look at each other. They had heard about the 8 yin-yang masters before. Now that the other party called themselves the 8 yin-yang masters, they were a little confused. Tian Qian smiled and told the 2 of them about the situation. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen suddenly understood. They nodded slightly and returned the greeting. Although the two of them had some opinions about the 8 yin-yang masters' actions back then, they were from the same sect after all, so they had to put on an act. Sect leaders, what a rare guest. Please come in. Gusang Duoji put his palms together and greeted the two of them warmly. Master, you're too polite, Zhang Xiaoyang replied. You don't have to greet us. We'll just sit on the side. Except for the entrance in the southeast corner, the entire venue was surrounded by tables and chairs. Zhang Xiaoyang did not want to sit with Lu Yuanshan, so he proposed to sit on the side and refused to sit on the main altar. How can this do? Gusang Duoji did not know that the two of them had a grudge with Lu Yuanshan. He said, If I let the two of you sit on the side, wouldn't I be guilty of not treating my guests well? Please take a seat on the altar. As he spoke, he invited the two of them to the altar. We appreciate the master's kindness, Yu Xingchen said to Gusang Duoji. The two of us are used to being free and undisciplined. We don't like formal occasions. The side seats are quieter. Please let us sit casually. Yu Xingchen was a calm person. He knew when to speak and when to act, unlike Zhang Xiaoyang, who was straightforward. Okay. Gusang Duoji thought for a moment and said, It's convenient for others and convenient for ourselves. Since the two of you prefer peace and quiet, this old monk will follow suit. Thank you, master, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Gusang Duoji. He turned and walked to the side seats, ignoring the 8 yin-yang masters. Yu Xingchen nodded to the crowd and followed closely behind. Gusang Duoji looked at the backs of the two and frowned slightly. He then turned and led the 8 yin-yang masters to the altar. The 8 yin-yang masters are not good people either, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingchen as he walked. What do you mean? Yu Xingchen asked. Aside from them, who else would be able to use such a vicious punishment? Zhang Xiaoyang said as he looked at Yi Fan, who was tied to the octopole spell pillar and deformed beyond recognition. How do you know they did it? Yu Xingchen asked as he walked. Can the motley crew on the altar make these pillars? Zhang Xiaoyang turned his head and asked Yu Xingchen. Yu Xingchen shook his head. The 8 extreme spell pillars were obviously set up by a Taoist master. The mountain spirits and wild monsters on the altar did not have this ability at all. Among the 8 yin-yang masters, did you notice the horsetail whisk and sword of the second Taoist? Zhang Xiaoyang turned his head and asked again. Yu Xingchen shook his head again. The tip of his horsetail whisk is white with a hint of red. The blood stains are too deep. The sword on his back is also faintly glowing with blood, Zhang Xiaoyang said with a frown. If I'm not wrong, the injuries on Eldritch's arms and eyes were caused by him. Yu Xingchen frowned and turned his head to look at Di Kuan. At the same time, he used his heavenly eye technique. Buzz, 2 golden lights flashed across Yu Xingchen's eyes. Yu Xingchen's frown deepened when he saw this. The sword on Di Kuan's back was glowing with blood, while the swords of the other 7 yin-yang masters were all normal. Zhang Xiaoyang's analysis was completely correct. Look at the crowd again, Zhang Xiaoyang said in a low voice. Yu Xingchen immediately turned his head to look at the crowd and scan back and forth. Yu Xingchen's expression changed immediately when he saw this. Among the crowd, a young man with the appearance of Buffon stood there quietly. His body was surrounded by a golden light that shone through the top of his head. Emperor Star! Yu Xingchen blurted out. Shoo! Zhang Xiaoyang put his index finger to his lips, indicating for Yu Xingchen to keep quiet. Chapter 612. Half an hour passed quickly. During this period of time, representatives from various sects and schools had arrived one after another. The originally empty seats in the venue had immediately become overcrowded, and the atmosphere was extraordinarily lively. Everyone was greeting each other in their seats, exchanging hypocritical pleasantries. All of them had the appearance of otherworldly experts. The grand occasion made Gusang Doji very satisfied. Since the establishment of the Sweet Dew Temple, this was the first time so many experts had gathered here. After today, he and the Sweet Dew Temple would be famous all over the world. At that time, perhaps the new position of Guardian King would be his. Thinking of this, an imperceptible smile appeared on Gasang Doji's face. On the top of a mountain dozens of miles away from the venue, a 17 or 18-year-old boy stood there quietly, staring at the noisy venue with a pair of amber eyes. His face was solemn and his eyes were cold. He wore a white Confucian headscarf, a snow-white robe, a white jade belt around his waist, and white snow boots on his feet. His face was like jade, his lips were red and his teeth were white. On his forehead, a silver light flickered and a stream of qi flowed. Behind him, thousands of war wolves sat quietly on the empty snow. Pairs of green eyes looked coldly at the crowd in the venue at the foot of the mountain. From time to time, they licked their lips with their blood-red tongues. These war wolves were extremely large, each as big as a pony. The 7 snow wolves in the lead were even more robust, not much different from adult bison. The wolf pack was extremely quiet and did not make the slightest movement. Like a well-trained army, they were motionless. The boy looked up at the sky and frowned slightly, showing an anxious expression. At this moment, a group of people came to the foot of Feishue Peak. The 3 people in the lead were dressed in snow-white robes. Each of them held a weapon and walked in a hurry. Behind them were dozens of people wearing green curtains and bamboo hats. Their faces were covered with a light veil, only revealing their dark eyes. They looked extremely mysterious. These people covered in green curtains were divided into 3 rows. Their footsteps were orderly, and the sound of their footsteps was extremely heavy. Everywhere they passed, even the gravel under the snow was trampled into slag by them. Father, Brother Chun, the 2 of you stay here and support me. I'm going to check on Fan Air's situation. Without my signal, don't act rashly. The white-clothed man with the golden sword frowned as he spoke to the other 2. This person was none other than Yi Fan's father, the inverse scale sword, Yi Kong. The other 2 were the head of the Yi clan, Snow Sword Yi Yun and Absolute Needle Yi Qin. On the way back to the great Ming dynasty from the Mongol Empire, they heard about the demon-slaying conference. When they heard that the people they were going to kill at the conference were Eldritch from his previous life and Yi Fan from this life, the 3 of them panicked, especially Yi Kong. He, who had always been calm and collected, immediately turned his horse around and prepared to go straight to Tibet to rescue Yi Fan. Yi Fan was his beloved son. Now that his beloved son had been captured and was in imminent danger, how could he not panic? In the end, it was Yi Yun and Yi Chen who worked together to stop Yi Kong from panicking. They told Yi Kong that the demon-slaying conference was far away in Tibet, and it would be held in 10 days. If they wanted to rescue Yi Fan, they had to make sufficient preparations. If they acted rashly, it would only make things worse. Only then did Yi Kong calm down. After the 3 of them discussed, they came up with a plan to rescue Yi Fan. Yi Yun handed the clan members over to a dozen experts and instructed them to lead the clan members forward. At this time, the Yi clan members had already entered the borders of the Great Ming dynasty. In addition, the imperial court had issued a general amnesty, and the Yi clan members had the crown prince's handwritten order in their hands. It could be said that their journey was smooth and foolproof. After handing over everything, the 3 of them whipped their horses and went straight to the ancestral home. In order to successfully rescue Yi Fan, Yi Yun brought out the 33 bronze men from the ancestral home for the first time. Now that the situation was urgent, he couldn't care less about the ancestral teachings. They prepared 3 carriages with 6 horses, loaded the 33 bronze figures into the carriages, and covered them with green curtains. Then they spurred the horses to drive the carriages, day and night, heading towards Tibet. After exhausting nearly 100 horses, the 3 of them and the 33 bronze men finally arrived on the 10th day. Kong be careful. Yi Yun instructed Yi Kong, this is Tibet, not China. Our mission is to rescue Fan Air, not to kill. You must control yourself and not act rashly, understand? Yi Yun's instructions to Yi Kong weren't without reason. Yi Kong was Yi Fan's father. After seeing his beloved son being controlled, he might not be able to control his emotions and start a massacre. This was the sacred land of Buddhism. Once he angered thousands of Tibetans, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing," Yi Kong said and nodded to the two of them. Using his movement technique, the tip of his foot touched the ground and followed the steep snow mountain into the sky. He stepped on the cliff and flew up. Looking at Yi Kong's back view, Yi Yun felt a little uneasy. He had a feeling that something big was going to happen today, something very unusual. He didn't know that when Yi Kong left, not only did he not restrain himself, he completely started a massacre. After Yi Kong left, Yi Chen took out a few copper coins from his sleeve and shook them in his hand. He then gently threw them on the ground. Every time something big happened, he would do a divination to predict the good or bad luck. But when he saw the divination shown by the copper coins, Yi Chen's face instantly changed. He was shocked. He saw that the copper coins were standing straight on the ground. Not a single one of them had fallen. This was the first time he saw such a divination since he was born. "Chinner, this divination is..." Yi Yun also saw this strange scene and asked Yi Chen in surprise. "This divination has no signs. There's no solution." Yi Chen shook his head and said, "No solution? Why is there no solution?" Yi Yun frowned and asked. "The mysteries of heaven are unfathomable," Ye Chen said with a solemn expression. Yi Yun's face changed when he heard that, at this moment, there were no empty seats in the venue. Most of the representatives from the various sects had already arrived. Outside the venue, the bustling crowd was crowded. All of them stood on their tiptoes and stretched their necks to look inside the venue. "Master Gu Sang, the time is up. We can start now." Tian Qian, who was sitting on the right side of Gu Sang Doji, whispered in Gu Sang Doji's ear. The 8 of them wanted to see Eldritch die as soon as possible, so they were more anxious than anyone else. Gu Sang Doji looked up at the sky and nodded gently. "Master Lu, the time is up. Can we start now?" Gu Sang Doji turned his head and asked Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan was the state preceptor and the person with the highest status in this conference. He naturally had to show respect. "Master is too polite." Lu Yuanshan, who was wearing a golden silk robe, put down the butter tea in his hand and said to Gu Sang Doji with a smile, "You are the leader of this demon-killing conference. How dare I make a decision? In that case, this old monk will be rude." Gu Sang Doji said to Lu Yuanshan. "Master, please," Lu Yuanshan said with a smile. After Gu Sang Doji nodded to Lu Yuanshan, he nodded to a red-clothed lama below the platform. The red-clothed lama put his palms together and returned the salute to Gu Sang Dorje. Then, he slowly walked to the front of a huge drum beside him. He picked up 2 drumsticks from the drum stand and began to beat the huge leather drum. Dong, 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 the rhythm of the drum went from slow to urgent. The sound entered the ears and shook the soul, making people feel refreshed. Buzz, more than a dozen red-clothed lamas, standing on both sides of the venue, immediately blew the huge copper horns in their hands. Gu Sang Doji, who was wearing a solemn monk robe, slowly stood up from his seat and looked at the crowd below. His face was sacred and his eyes were majestic. Hula, when the countless Tibetan people saw Gu Sang Doji stand up, they immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to him. Gu Sang Doji was the abbot of the Sweet Dew Temple and the junior brother of Golden Rock Phuang. This time, he had personally captured Eldritch, who had fallen into the demon path. Naturally, he had a supreme position in the hearts of the believers. When Lu Yuanshan saw this, he was displeased. He was the imperial preceptor. These dirty Tibetan people did not even bow to him just now, but now they were bowing to Gu Sang Doji. He drank the butter tea with a gloomy face and looked coldly at the kneeling Tibetan people below. However, when he saw the crown prince in the crowd, who was wearing a Tibetan robe and looking at him coldly, he almost spat out the mouthful of butter tea in his mouth. The Crown Prince is here too. Lu Yuanshan was shocked. What is he doing here? He is in disguise. Lu Yuanshan thought to himself and prepared to get off the platform to welcome the Crown Prince. However, at this moment, the Crown Prince frowned and shook his head gently. Obviously, the Crown Prince did not want to reveal his identity. Lu Yuanshan understood tacitly, and the butt that had just lifted up sat back down again. Hula, the Tibetan people finished kowtowing and stood up from the ground. The Crown Prince's figure was once again submerged in the crowd. Lu Yuanshan's mind was spinning as he thought about the Crown Prince's intentions. To see Eldritch being killed with his own eyes? Impossible. Lu Yuanshan quickly rejected this idea. If that was the case, he could reveal his identity and come personally as the Crown Prince. In this way, not only could he see Eldritch being killed, but he could also show the royal family's sympathy for the people and love them like his own children. If he was not here to see Eldritch being killed, then what was the Crown Prince doing here? He came all the way from the capital. Could it be that he was here to visit incognito? That was also impossible. Now that the 4 countries were pressuring the border, Zhou Dao had powerful soldiers in his hands and was plotting a rebellion. This was the time of national crisis. The Crown Prince would not ignore the country's crisis and come here to play and visit incognito. This was not the case. That was not the case. Then what was his purpose? Lu Yuanshan thought hard. He had to guess the Crown Prince's purpose because he was the state preceptor. He wanted to use this opportunity to help the Crown Prince achieve his goal and show his loyalty. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. This thought made his expression change instantly. He was not here to watch the show, nor was he here to visit incognito. Could it be that he came to save Eldritch? Thinking of this, Lu Yuanshan looked at the crowd again. This time, he looked at the old eunuch next to the Crown Prince. At this time, the old eunuch's eyes were as sharp as knives as he stared at him. When their eyes met, the old eunuch looked at Yi Fan in the middle of the execution field and then turned his eyes to Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan's pupils shrank. The old eunuch's meaning was clear. The Crown Prince came for this person. His deduction was not wrong. The Crown Prince wanted to save Eldritch. Fan air. Just as Lu Yuanshan was shocked, a heart-wrenching roar came from the sky. The sound was deafening and resounding through the sky. At this time, the drum had just stopped and everyone was frightened by this roar. Night sky. When the Crown Prince saw the white figure in midair that was as strong and vigorous as a dragon, his face instantly lit up with joy. Chapter 6:13. The newcomer was none other than Yi Kong. He knew that his son would definitely suffer some physical pain this time, but he never imagined that the scene in front of him would be so tragic. When he saw his beloved son hanging from the 8 extreme spell pillars in the middle of the execution field, missing both arms, Yi Kong let out the most heart-wrenching roar of his life. How could he not lose control of his emotions when his beloved son, whom he couldn't even bear to slap since he was young, was being tortured like this? With red-rimmed eyes, he descended from the sky like an enraged lion. Boom! With the inverse scale sword in hand, Yi Kong landed right in front of the 8 extreme spell pillars. The huge impact created a huge crater with a radius of 5 feet. Fan air! Yi Kong roared as he leaped onto the steps of the 8 extreme spell pillars and rushed in front of Yi Fan. Yi Fan slowly raised his head and looked at Yi Kong with a pair of bloody sockets. With an extremely weak voice, he called out, "Father." This call of "Father" made Yi Kong's heart feel like it was being stabbed by 1,000 swords and slashed by 10,000 knives. Fan air! Yi Kong choked, his lips trembling. He extended his trembling hand and gently stroked Yi Fan's bloodied cheek. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, and the pain pierced through his heart. Looking at his beloved son, who no longer looked human, with his eyes gouged out, arms chopped off, and tendons severed. 2 streams of hot tears flowed from his eyes. Fan father came late, came late. Yi Kong choked. Father, Yi Fan said in a choked voice. 2 streams of blood flowed out from the 2 holes in his face. Sigh, what a sin! The touching reunion of father and son made Zhang Xiaoyang, who was sitting at the side, shake his head and sigh. Yu Xingchen frowned and remained silent. Fan tell father, who hurt you like this? Yi Kong wiped his tears with his sleeve and asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan turned his head to the back and stared at the spell altar with bloodshot eyes. Yi Kong raised his head and swept his cold gaze over the crowd on the execution platform. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. The crowd on the execution platform looked at Yi Kong with disdain. All of them had hundreds of years of cultivation and did not put Yi Kong in their eyes at all. Lu Yuanshan had an awkward expression on his face, not knowing what kind of expression he should make. He regretted sitting on the spell altar. If he had known earlier, he would have sat at the side like Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen. Now, he had become jackals of the same tribe as them. Yi Kong's eyes stopped on Gusandoji. Are you Gusandoji? Yi Kong asked Gusandoji in a terrifyingly calm voice. That's me, Gusandoji replied. You must be this devil's father, Yi Kong, right? Upon hearing the name Yi Kong, the crowd was shocked at first, then they started whispering to each other. Rumor had it that Yi Kong was a once-in-a-century genius of the Yi family. He had met an immortal master at Mount Longhu and learned the immortal sword secret technique, the ethereal sword technique. No one could compare to him. Yi Kong did not answer Gusandoji. Instead, he slowly unsheathed his sword. Just as the inverse scale sword left its scabbard, countless rays of golden light shot out from the sword. Clang! The inverse scale sword let out a dragon's roar and was as smooth as the autumn waters. The entire sword was completely unsheathed by Yi Kong. The golden light illuminated the night sky and the rocky ground in a radius of 30 feet. It also illuminated his red eyes and expressionless face. It was the inverse scale sword. As soon as Yi Kong unsheathed his sword, the experts at the conference were shocked. They had long heard of the inverse scale sword in Yi Kong's hand, but they had never seen it before. They had heard that this sword was innately engraved with dragon patterns and blazing yang energy. It was extremely domineering. Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, it truly lived up to its reputation. Yi Kong. Gusandoji pointed at Yi Kong and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to rob me?" However, before Gusandoji could finish his sentence, the inverse scale sword in Yi Kong's hand had already swung down. Whoosh! As Yi Kong swung his sword down, a huge golden light screen shot out from the inverse scale divine weapon in his hand and headed straight for Gusandoji, who was dozens of feet away. The speed of the golden light screen was as fast as lightning. It arrived in the blink of an eye. Gusandoji, who was in the center of the spell platform, did not even have time to see Yi Kong's movements before the golden light screen arrived in front of him. The dazzling golden light enveloped the entire spell platform in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Tian Qian, who was sitting beside Gusandoji, grabbed the arm of the stunned and confused Gusandoji. Then, he activated his movement technique and leaped into the air. Lu Yuanshan, on the other hand, made a hand seal the moment Yi Kong launched his sword move. His figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. The Savage Corpse King's movement technique was not any slower than Lu Yuanshan's. He followed closely behind Lu Yuanshan and disappeared into thin air. The rest of the enemies used their own abilities. They either used earth meld or movement techniques to quickly disperse. Boom! A huge sound rang out. Stone chips flew everywhere, and waves of air spread in all directions. As the huge golden light screen descended from the sky, the huge spell platform, which was more than 300 feet long and made of solid stone, was instantly split into 2 from the middle. Some of the enemies who were slower in their movement techniques were not able to dodge in time due to their carelessness. They were directly split from head to toe by the golden light screen released by Yi Kong's inverse scale sword. Puff, 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 crack, crack, the sound of splattering brains and the sound of breaking bones rang out in an instant and disappeared in an instant. These people did not even have the time to see Eldritch being killed. They had already gone to see the King of Hell. Crash! After the spell platform was struck by Yi Kong's sword move, it collapsed and disintegrated. Yi Kong's one move had destroyed the spell platform. Several experts with hundreds of years of cultivation had died instantly. What a great sword move! Zhang Xiaoyang, who was sitting at the side, exclaimed. Yi Kong's sword move looked ordinary and unremarkable. However, once it was unleashed, it had the domineering power of a landslide. As expected of the Yi family's once-in-a-century prodigy, this Yi Kong was truly impressive. This person can unleash such a domineering move just by using his vital energy. If he had used his spiritual energy cultivation. Yu Xingqian, who was sitting beside Zhang Xiaoyang, frowned and turned to look at Zhang Xiaoyang. If he had used his spiritual energy, I'm afraid this sweet dew temple would have been reduced to ashes by now. Zhang Xiaoyang finished Yu Xingqian's sentence with a serious expression. I can see that this person does not have any spiritual energy cultivation. I think the immortal who taught him this move must have done so intentionally, Yu Xingqian said. I heard that this person was an immortal beggar he met on Longhu Mountain. That's how he learned the immortal sword move, the ethereal sword technique. Say, I live on Longhu Mountain. Why didn't I have such good luck? Zhang Xiaoyang said, then suddenly paused and turned to look at Yu Xingqian. Yu Xingqian was confused by Zhang Xiaoyang's look. It's him, it's him. Zhang Xiaoyang said excitedly to Yu Xingqian. It's him. Yu Xingqian frowned, even more confused. Beggar. Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingqian. The beggar we met in the restaurant must be the immortal that Yi Kong met back then. Didn't old Qing tell us that the beggar we met was an immortal? Hearing Zhang Xiaoyang's words, Yu Xingqian was stunned for a moment before realization dawned on him. They were both beggars and immortals, and they both appeared on Longhu Mountain. The beggar they met must be the same person who taught Yi Kong the ethereal sword technique. I'm afraid we can't just stand by and watch today, Zhang Xiaoyang said. What do you mean? Yu Xingqian asked with a frown. The Emperor's star is here, and so is the immortal's disciple. This only proves that Eldritch isn't a bad person in this world, Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingqian. Zhang Xiaoyang said to Xingqian, look at that disorderly mob again. You can tell right from wrong with just one look. You and I are both cultivators and leaders of our respective sections. We can't do things against our conscience. You want to help Eldritch? Yu Xingqian asked Zhang Xiaoyang directly. You want to raid the execution ground in front of all the large sects? Are you coming or not? Zhang Xiaoyang asked even more directly. Fine, I'll just give up my position as sect master, Yu Xingqian said as he prepared to stand up. Zhang Xiaoyang pulled Yu Xingqian to sit down. Why are you more anxious than I am? Zhang Xiaoyang whispered to Yu Xingqian. Let's wait first. Why? Yu Xingqian frowned and asked Zhang Xiaoyang. Don't you think it's strange? Zhang Xiaoyang asked Yu Xingqian. All of Eldritch's enemies are here, but none of his friends from back then are here? You mean? Yu Xingqian seemed to understand something. Just wait and see. The best part is yet to come, Zhang Xiaoyang said with a smile. Let's see the legendary ethereal sword technique first. Yu Xingqian was speechless. On the other side, Yi Kong turned around with the inverse scale sword in his hand and faced Yi Fan. Fan Air, hang in there for a while. I'll put you down now, Yi Kong said as he swung the inverse scale sword at the golden chains around Yi Fan's body. Clang, golden light shot out in all directions as the sound of metal clashing rang out. The golden chains did not react to Yi Kong's attack at all. They didn't even leave a mark on them. Yi Kong frowned. It was obvious that the chains in front of him were no ordinary objects. Father, Yi Fan said in a weak voice. Don't waste your energy. You can't break these chains. Just leave. Don't worry about me. Ha ha ha. Inverse scale sword, Yi Kong. That's all there is to you. Tian Qian's laughter rang out from the sky. Yi Kong raised his head and looked at the sky. Tian Qian, who was wearing Yi Fan's 8 treasures embroidered robe, slowly descended from the sky and looked at Yi Kong with disdain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The remaining 7 followed closely behind with mocking smiles on their faces. These 8 extreme spell pillars aren't the firewood you use to cook. You can break them with a single strike, Di Kuan said with a smile. Father, leave now, Yi Fan said loudly to Yi Kong. He didn't tell Yi Kong about how the 8 yin-yang disciples had treated him. The reason was simple. He was worried that Yi Kong wouldn't be a match for them. If that happened, not only would he fail to save Yi Kong, he would also be captured. Hearing this, Yi Kong slowly took 5 steps back. A wise man submits to circumstances. I think you should back off now. Scram, Di Kuan said sarcastically when he saw Yi Kong take 5 steps back. He thought that Yi Kong was going to back off. However, he was wrong. Yi Kong didn't turn around and leave as he expected. Instead, he saw Yi Xian grip the swimming dragon sword hilt made of black gold with both hands and raise the inverse scale sword above his head. He closed his eyes and focused his qi. Old Yu, watch carefully. Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes widened as he reminded Yu Xingqian beside him. Yu Xingqian also noticed something and stared unblinkingly at Yi Kong. Boom! As Yi Kong channeled the Xiantian Yuan Qi in his body, a huge golden pillar of light more than 3 meters thick shot out from Yi Kong's body. It shot straight into the air, reaching a height of several hundred meters. Buzz! Yi Kong raised the inverse scale sword above his head and let out an excited cry. Instantly, the golden light dazzled and dazzled. The sword's ray expanded to more than 3 meters and shot toward the bull. Whoosh! The Xiantian Yuan Qi stirred up a huge shockwave, causing Yi Kong's clothes to flutter in the wind. All the experts in the arena, as well as his enemies, were stunned by Yi Kong's earth-shattering aura. They all fell silent as if they were mutes. The 8 yin-yang disciples all took 3 steps back, their expressions changing drastically. Yi Kong's sudden increase in strength was unbelievable to them. What a powerful Yuan Qi! Sasaki, who was beside Matsumoto Takeyoshi, frowned and said. Matsumoto Takeyoshi frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. This Yi Kong is really something. The disguised crown prince also praised from the bottom of his heart. He had only heard rumors about Yi Kong, but he didn't expect him to be even more powerful than the rumors made him out to be. Void Spirit Slash. Yi Kong said coldly as his eyes suddenly opened. Whoosh! Chapter 6:14. Whoosh! Following Yi Kong's swift downward slash, a gigantic golden sword arc burst forth from the inverse scale sword, heading straight for the octopole spell pillar. The sword arc was over 3 zhang long, dazzling and dazzling with golden light. Its speed was as fast as lightning, arriving in the blink of an eye. Rip! The golden sword arc tore through the air, producing a sharp sound. This Yi Kong is so arrogant, trying to break the octopole spell pillar, the 8 gates golden lock. Tian Qian, the leader of the Yin-Yang 8 Scions, was secretly shocked. An ant trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Di Kuan sneered as he watched Yi Kong attack the octopole spell pillar. The 8 extreme technique pillars gathered the energy of the 8 extremes of Yin and Yang in the heavens and the earth. Coupled with the 8-gate golden lock formation, it could be said to be flawless and possessed shocking might. Besides the 8 of them, it was utterly impossible to break through. Even if Yi Tian wanted to break through the heavens, he was still just a mortal. Wanting to destroy the octopole spell pillars with his meager cultivation was simply a fool's dream, wishful thinking. The remaining 6 wore looks of disdain and mockery. They could almost see how Yi Kong's organs were damaged by the octopole spell pillar, and how he was sent flying. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen didn't even blink, not missing any of Yi Kong's subtle movements. The strength of the legendary immortal technique ethereal sword art would depend on night sky's sword strike. As the saying went, the connoisseur saw the artistry, while the layman saw the excitement. The Crown Prince had never seen such a magnificent battle before, so he was naturally excited. He clenched his fists, his eyes widened, and his heart was in his throat. He was sweating profusely for Yi Kong's attack. Yi Kong's casual move just now destroyed the huge spell platform and killed several experts in an instant. Now, he didn't know if this sword could break the octopole spell pillar. The old eunuch on the side looked at the golden pillar of light shooting up into the night sky and nodded repeatedly. Whoosh! Yi Kong's gigantic golden sword arc was extremely fast, from the moment it was released to the moment it struck. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic golden sword arc and the octopole spell pillar collided. Boom! A deafening boom rang out. Dazzling golden light burst forth. The ground trembled, and waves of air spread out in all directions. Everyone present covered their ears with their hands and covered their eyes with their sleeves as they were shaken by the sudden burst of light and the loud sound. Phew walla! The huge shock wave overturned all the tables in the execution field, and all the butter tea, pastries, and fruits flew into the air. All the experts displayed their abilities, using their sleeves to flick their sleeves while using their movement techniques to fly up from their seats. Lu Yuanshan was more cautious this time. Taking advantage of the opportunity to dodge, he brought the Savage Corpse King and used his movement technique to sneak to the Crown Prince's side. He took off the conspicuous Taoist robe on his body. At the same time, he urged his spiritual energy to set up a chi wall in front of the Crown Prince, blocking the chi wave for the Crown Prince. "This humble subject greets your highness the Crown Prince," Lu Yuanshan said softly as he spread the chi. The Crown Prince glanced at him before continuing to watch the execution field. He was in a hurry to find out the power of Yi Kong's sword, so he was not in the mood to bother with Lu Yuanshan. Lu Yuanshan was given the cold shoulder and did not say anything else. Inside the execution field, the Yin-Yang 8 disciples blocked their eyes with one hand to avoid the golden light, while the other flung their sleeves to block the chi wave. Di Kuan impatiently waved his sleeves, driving away the flying dust. He wanted to see to what extent Yi Kong was injured by the 8 extreme spell pillar. However, when the dust gradually dispersed, the scene in front of him instantly shocked him. Yi Kong stood quietly in place, holding his sword with one hand, not moving at all. He was not sent flying like he had imagined, but was completely unscathed, and not a single hair was damaged. How was this possible? How could this guy not be injured by the shockwave? Di Kuan hurriedly looked at the 8 extreme spell pillar with a face full of disbelief. The spell pillar was still the same as before. Di Kuan let out a long breath. When they saw the 8 extreme spell pillar still standing in the middle of the execution field, the expressions of the experts in the execution field began to change. The shock on their faces just now had now turned into disdain. "The thunder is loud, but the rain is small," one of the sect masters among the experts said with a smile. "This genius of the Yi clan is only SOSO. Another sect leader chimed in. "This 8 extreme spell pillar is indeed powerful. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples live up to their reputation. As expected of the cornerstone of the Taoist sect, their Taoist techniques are exquisite. It is our Taoist sect's fortune to have such a high Tao." Voices began to slander Yi Kong and praise the Yin-Yang 8 disciples from the crowd. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples cupped their hands in greeting to the experts with a smug expression. As they cupped their hands in greeting, they looked at Yi Kong with a cold smile. Ethereal, light but not spirit, as expected of a good sword technique, a good sword technique. He Di Kuan sneered at the night sky. Don't embarrass yourself here, get lost. Tian Qian smiled at Yi Kong. The night sky listened quietly, not moving at all. In the distance, Gu Sandoji stroked his beard with a smile. Earlier, he was completely shocked by Yi Kong's aura, but now, it seemed that it was only SOSO. When Yi Fan heard the crowds mocking and ridiculing of his father, a flame of fury rose in his heart. They could insult him and beat him up, but they couldn't insult his father. However, even though he was angry and wanted to help his father out of this predicament, he was unable to do so. Sigh. The Crown Prince sighed when he saw that the 8 extreme spell pillar was still intact. He clenched his right fist and hid his left palm. The 8 extreme spell pillar was indeed powerful. Even Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique couldn't break it. The Crown Prince was a little dejected. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples were indeed worthy of their reputation. If he could recruit them in the future, he would be like a tiger that had grown wings. This bunch of idiots, they've already lost, but they still have the mood to be smug? Just as the experts present were praising the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, Zhang Xiaoyang smirked as he looked at the Yin-Yang 8 disciples who were cupping their hands in greeting. Yu Xingchen smiled and didn't comment. I say, Yi Kong, why haven't you scrammed yet? Do you still feel that you haven't lost enough face? Di Kuan mocked when he saw that Yi Kong was still standing there. Crack! At this moment, a crisp sound came from above. Yi Kong's lips curled. When the Yin-Yang 8 disciples heard this crisp sound, they immediately looked up into the sky. It didn't matter, but the 8 of them were so shocked that their expressions changed drastically. On the top of the 8 extreme spell pillar, a crack more than a foot long had appeared. The 8 extreme spell pillar cracked. Crack. Crack. The crack gradually extended from top to bottom. When the experts who were praising the Yin-Yang 8 disciples saw this, the smiles on their faces immediately froze. They looked at the 8 extreme spell pillar that kept cracking in silence, their faces filled with disbelief. Gu Sandoji was also stunned in an instant, dumbfounded. How could this be? Wasn't this 8 extreme spell pillar unmatched? How could it be split open by Yi Kong? Gu Sandoji almost couldn't believe that all this was real. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's eyes were wide open, and his smile disappeared. Crack. Crack. The crack on the 8 extreme spell pillar grew bigger and bigger, and it instantly split open to the ground. Clang! At the same time, a clear ringing sound rang out and a golden line appeared on the 8 golden chains that were tied around Yi Fan's body. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples' pupils contracted instantly. The 8 golden locks were actually split open by Yi Kong. At this moment, the execution field was extremely quiet. Only the whistling of the wind and the crisp sound of the 8 extreme spell pillar cracking could be heard. Boom! Just as everyone was dumbfounded, the huge 8 extreme spell pillar instantly cracked open and splattered everywhere. Bang! At the same time, the 8 golden chains wrapped around Yi Fan's body broke. Good sword technique. Good sword technique. Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes were wide open as he blurted out. With one move, the empty spirit slash, the 8 extreme spell pillar and the 8 golden locks were completely destroyed. What kind of power was this? Good. 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 The Crown Prince said the word good 3 times in a row. A celestial technique was indeed a celestial technique, and its power was beyond the imagination of mortals. The old eunuch and Lu Yuanshan were shocked. They were also completely stunned by Yi Kong's sword technique. The Yi family's genius was no joke. Sasaki and Miyamoto Akichi looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. As the saying went, a tiger father would not beget a dog son, and vice versa, a tiger son would not beget a dog father. Yi Fan's father's sword technique was so high, and the sharpness of his sword technique was something they had never seen before. Once the shackles were removed, Yi Fan's body loosened, and his body fell down instantly. Whoosh! The moment Yi Fan fell, Yi Kong used his movement technique and instantly hugged Yi Fan. In order to save his beloved son, he used all of his vital energy to activate the empty spirit sword technique. The deep affection between father and son, coupled with the exquisite celestial sword technique, Yi Kong released an extraordinary power. Fan air. Yi Kong looked at Yi Fan in his arms and shouted in pain. Father! Yi Fan called Yi Kong weakly. The scene in front of Zhang Xiaoyang made his eyes turn red. Yu Xingchen turned his head to the side, unable to look directly at the scene. This scene was so touching that even the two of them couldn't help but feel moved by the deep affection between father and son. Matsumoto Takeyoshi furrowed his brows with a solemn expression. Yi Kong's sword just now made him finally understand why he had failed when he went to the Yi clan to snatch the weapon forging manual. This person's sword technique was so high that it was completely beyond his imagination. No wonder Qi Yao's arm was chopped off by this person, and she had to run away. With this person's sword technique, even if the 4 great guardians of the Tsuaming Hall were here, they would not be able to do anything to him. In terms of sword and saber experts, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had seen hundreds and thousands of them. Among them, there were not only top experts like Ito Fumio and Yamada Shingo, but also Sasaki and Bamu Chongqing, who were experts in using swords. As the saying goes, even if you have not eaten pork, you have seen pigs run. After seeing so many experts, coupled with the green and white emissaries' frequent explanations, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had gradually become an expert in judging experts. What kind of method the opponent used, whether it was close combat or long-range attack, movement technique or special technique, whether it was a powerful weapon or a high cultivation level, he only needed to look at a few moves to be able to guess. However, this was the first time he had seen Yi Kong's sword technique, and he could not guess what kind of method it was at all. Ito Fumio and Yamada Shingo's swordsmanship used spiritual energy. Sasaki and Yagi Long Kiyoshi's swordsmanship used swordsmanship. Mifumi Kunikaku and Aniki Lang's swordsmanship used swordsmanship. Yokoyama Yugo and Funiketsu Shinichi's swordsmanship focused more on strength and speed. However, the ethereal sword technique that Yi Kong used was completely different from these people's sword techniques. This person didn't use spirit chi, sword chi, special techniques, or strength. With just a light wave, he was able to unleash an earth-shattering power. This person could not be underestimated in the future. Matsumoto Takeyoshi remembered Yi Kong. When the 8 yin-yang disciples saw that the 8 extreme spell pillars and 8-gate golden lock were destroyed, they immediately looked at Gesang Dorji in the distance. Their magic weapons were destroyed, but the golden Buddha treasure bowl was still there. Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique did not hurt the golden Buddha treasure bowl, because the golden Buddha treasure bowl was still shining on Yi Fan's head. With tears in his eyes, Yi Kong carried Yi Fan, who had lost his arms and tendons, on his back. Then, he pulled a golden iron chain from the ground and tied it to his waist, directly tying Yi Fan together with himself. Chapter 6:15. Whoosh. As soon as Yi Kong's voice fell, Gesang Dorje tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and rose into the air. He slowly landed 5 feet away from Yi Kong and stood with the Yin-Yang 8 masters. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The remaining 300 Cho clan members used their movement techniques and surrounded Yi Kong and his son in the center of the execution field. What do you want? Yi Kong held his sword with one hand, looked around and asked coldly. Benefactor, ye can leave, but please leave behind the devil on your back. Gesang Dorji's voice was loud like a bell. He has fallen into the devil's path. If he is not eliminated, he will bring disaster to the world and plunge people into misery and suffering. Yi Kong, put down that evil creature and we can spare your life. Otherwise, next year today will be the anniversary of you and your son's death. Di Kuan said fiercely to Yi Kong. Yi Kong looked up at Gesang Dorji and the 8 yin-yang masters with cold eyes. Father. Yi Fan, who was lying on Yi Kong's back, used a weak voice to whisper into Yi Kong's ear. The one who disfigured this child was Gu Sang Doji. The one who dug out this child's eyes and cut off the tendons of this child's arms and legs was this Taoist. Father, you must be careful of them. Yi Kong did not listen, but when he heard it, he was furious. Evil monk Gu Sang. In yang demonic Tao. If I don't tear you into pieces today, I, Yi Kong, am not a human. Yi Kong's eyes turned red in anger as he stared at Gu Sang Doji and the 8 yin-yang masters, gnashing his teeth as he said this. Only now did he realize that the inhumane torture that had been inflicted on Aiko had been done by them. In that case, don't blame this old monk for being unreasonable. Gu Sang Doji put his palms together and said with his head lowered. Didn't you want to kill Eldritch with your own hands? Now that the time has come, you may begin. Tianqian, who was the leader, turned to the 300 enemies behind him with a smile on his face. Ever since they started preparing for this demon-slaying conference, these 300 enemies had been thinking about killing Eldritch with their own hands. However, Gu Sandoj and the 8 yin-yang warriors had been forbidding them from taking Eldritch's life with the excuse that it was not the right time. Now that Heavenly Qian said they could do it, the 300 enemies' eyes immediately shone. They looked at each other for a while, then the corners of their mouths curled up, and killing intent appeared. This Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique was indeed powerful, but as the saying goes, a good tiger cannot win against a pack of wolves. How could over 300 experts with hundreds of years of cultivation not be able to win against this mortal? As long as they rushed forward, even if this Yi Kong had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would definitely be torn into pieces in the blink of an eye. If he didn't take revenge now, when would he? Swish, 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 the 300 enemies instantly used their secret techniques and unique skills. The enemies were making hand seals, chanting incantations, controlling aura, and drawing talismans. It could be said that there were all kinds of strange things going on in the air. Whoosh, suddenly, the execution field was filled with mixed lights, and a fierce wind blew. Gu Sandoj, who was the leader, pointed his Buddhist staff at Yi Kong, who was in the middle, and shouted loudly, "Kill the evil and capture the demons, eliminate the evil and defend the righteous path." Hearing Gu Sandoj's order to kill, the enemies attacked Yi Kong with the skills that they had been accumulating for a long time. Whoosh! A black smoke column spurted out from the mouth of one of the monsters and went straight to Yi Fan, who was on Yi Kong's back. Whoosh! 3 beams of green light shot out from the other monster's single mouth and eyes, heading straight for Yi Fan. Whoosh! A red light claw shot out from the palm of a Taoist priest and whizzed toward Yi Fan. Clang! A blue sword light in the shape of a sword shot out from the fingers of a coquettish woman and stabbed fiercely. The rest of the enemies either used secret talismans, poisonous smoke, strong winds, or strange skills. In short, they used their most vicious skills to kill Yi Fan and his son. More than 300 colorful light columns shot toward Yi Kong in an instant. Kill the evil and capture the demons? Humph, this bald donkey is really something. Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. He turned a blind eye to so many monsters and decided to kill the Yi family's father and son. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Let's go and help. Yu Xingchen couldn't stand it anymore and said anxiously to Zhang Xiaoyang. These motley crew can't do anything to him. The ones we really need to be careful of are the Yin-Yang 8, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was watching the battle from the side seat, whispered in Yu Xingchen's ear, "Good steel should be used on the blade. When they make their move, it won't be too late for us to help." Yu Xingchen furrowed his brows and nodded lightly. Zhang Xiaoyang was right. Yi Kong's ethereal sword technique was exquisite beyond compare. The inverse scale sword in his hand was blazing with yang energy and was especially effective against demons and monsters. Based on this, these motley crew were definitely no match for Yi Kong. The reason why the 8 yin-yang masters wanted them to be the vanguard was to exhaust Yi Kong's strength and vitality. When he was exhausted, they would attack him together. What despicable yin-yang 8! Yu Xingqian gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. The crown prince's palms were sweaty again. He really wanted to ask the experts hiding in the crowd to help. But then again, it was true that those people were experts, but it depended on who they were compared to. If they were compared to martial arts experts, they could be considered top-notch experts. But if they were compared to Eldritch's enemies in the execution field, they probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a single blow. Asking them to help was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. Asking Lu Yuanshan and the old eunuch to help? Probably not. Lu Yuanshan was already the state preceptor. Asking him to help was no different from revealing his identity. Once the crowd revolted, the consequences would be unimaginable. And the old eunuch was responsible for his own safety. Even if the crown prince ordered him to help, the old eunuch might not obey. The old emperor had once ordered the old eunuch to prioritize the crown prince's safety as his top priority. Even if the crown prince gave the order personally, the old eunuch could disobey it. The only thing he could do now was to wait and see. The crown prince thought to himself. Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and calmly watched everything that was happening in the execution field. He could tell that the Yin-Yang 8 and Gasang Doji were bent on killing Yi Fan. But they had made a mistake. It was the same mistake that Zhou Dao had made back then. After capturing Yi Fan, they should have killed him immediately. There was no need for a demon-slaying conference. This person would be reborn from the ashes after every great calamity, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Who knew what would happen after such a great calamity this time? Being resourceful and scheming, he had already prepared 2 different plans in his mind. The first plan, when his enemies gained the upper hand, he would have Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki make a move and help his enemies kill Yi Fan. Like this, great god Xie Tian and his mortal enemy would be eliminated. He would also be acquainted with Eldritch's enemies and could even use them for his own purposes. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had already expected the appearance of the Yi family. Moreover, he had already determined that the person saving Yi Fan wouldn't be Yi Kong alone. If his guess wasn't wrong, the Yi family's head, Yi Yun, and the other experts of the Yi family should have already arrived at Feishua Peak. Perhaps they were hiding in the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. Even the person at the Agony Hawk Peak would appear. As for the second plan, it was the complete opposite of the first plan. Once the experts coming to save Yi Fan had a chance of winning and the situation was good, he would have Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki make a move. Only they wouldn't help his enemies, but rather they would help Yi Fan escape from the execution field. Like this, Yi Fan would owe him a favor. Even if they fought in the future, the loyal and righteous Yi Fan would think twice before acting because of this favor. In other words, if he wanted to help an expert, he would help whichever side was stronger. But speaking of this, he wouldn't make a rash decision until the most critical moment. Once he made a wrong decision, it would have the opposite effect. Looking at Yi Kong now, facing several hundred killing moves, he immediately thought of something and began to circulate his innate energy. These people were Aiko's enemies from the previous life, so when they made a move, they would definitely target Aiko. The most important thing right now was to protect Aiko. A huge golden ball of light appeared around him out of thin air. The golden ball of light was 3 feet in size and shone with a dazzling golden light. It completely enveloped him and Yi Fan, spinning non-stop. More than 300 rays of 5-colored light arrived in the blink of an eye and hit Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light. Boom, a deafening sound was heard. Rays of light shone in all directions and waves of air rolled. Under the attack of more than 300 rays of 5-colored light, Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light was still shining and spinning non-stop. This scene made all the enemies unable to believe their eyes. Yi Kong was actually able to withstand the joint attack of so many experts. The 8 yin-yang disciples' expressions changed drastically. They were stunned. Yi Kong, who didn't have any spiritual energy cultivation, was able to reach such a level with just his own energy. The execution field was completely silent. Only the buzzing sound of the light pillars in the enemy's hands and the buzzing sound of Yi Kong's golden protective ball of light could be heard. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen smiled and nodded. The crown prince was excited and secretly applauded. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was still calm. Within the golden ball of light, Yi Kong's long hair shot up to the sky. His eyes shone with golden light, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. "Those who stand in my way die." Yi Kong roared and slashed with the sword in his hand. Boom! With a loud sound, the golden ball of light instantly turned into countless rays of golden light and exploded. Whoosh! The beams of light shot out from the hands of the enemies were instantly drowned out by the tens of thousands of golden rays shot out from the golden ball of light. Bang 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 bang! The enemies' bodies were sent flying by the impact. Puff 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 puff! Nearly 100 enemies vomited blood and landed heavily on the ground. Among them, more than a dozen demons couldn't stand up and died on the spot. Yi Kong's move killed more than a dozen people and injured nearly 100 people. He forced 300 experts to retreat. Puff! At this moment, Yi Kong felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. In order to break the 8 extreme spell pillars, he had used 100% of his energy. Now, in order to stop the enemies from hurting his beloved son, he had used up all his energy by force. Even so, his gaze was still cold and domineering. He used the inverse scale sword in his hand to prop himself up. Chapter 6:16. Father! Yi Fan, who was lying on Yi Kong's back, shouted at the top of his lungs. He felt his father's body sway and heard his father spitting out blood. "Father! I'm fine," Yi Kong, who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, said firmly with his sword on the ground. "Father!" Yi Fan felt sorry for his father and choked with sobs. When he was born, his father sacrificed 10 years of his life to save him from the heavenly thunder. Now that he was in prison, his father used up all his strength to defeat the enemies. A father's love was like a mountain. In order to save him, his father did not care about his own safety and even risked his life. This was the kinship of the world. On the other side, the enemies who had flown backwards stabilized themselves and gathered together once again, surrounding Yi Kong and his son once again. Nearly 100 enemies who had been hit by Yi Kong just now wiped the blood from the corners of their mouth. Their faces were filled with killing intent as they gnashed their teeth. The remaining 200 enemies were breathing heavily as they tried to adjust their breathing. Yi Kong's attack was so powerful that it was beyond their imagination. It was indeed rare for a mortal to have this kind of ability. However, even if this person was made of iron, he was already at the end of his rope. He was spitting out blood and his body was weak. His body was unstable and his breathing was disordered. The consequences of forcefully activating his power were evident on this genius. As long as they attacked again, the father and son would definitely die. Yi Kong's serious injuries made Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen frown. Yi Kong's strength was already depleted. Under the forceful activation, his internal organs were severely injured. If this continued, not only would Yi Kong not be able to save his beloved son, he would also lose his life. It seemed that they had no choice but to do something. The two of them looked at each other and nodded. Whoosh! The two figures swayed and instantly turned into 2 golden phantoms, heading straight for the center of the execution field. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 golden figures appeared out of thin air in front of the night sky. Yi Kong, who was leaning on the ground with his sword, thought that an expert was about to launch a sneak attack. He immediately drew his sword and prepared to face the enemy. However, at this time, his vital qi had already dried up. He only had the strength to hold the sword, but not the strength to swing it. Puff, when Yi Kong saw that his attack had failed, he became anxious and spat out another mouthful of blood. He staggered and almost fell down. "Brother Yi, don't be nervous. The two of us are here to help you," Zhang Xiaoyang said as he reached out to support Yi Kong's left arm. Clap clap clap. Yu Xingchen supported Yi Kong's right arm with one hand, while her other hand quickly tapped on Yi Kong's chest. He was helping Yi Kong seal the origin qi in his 5 viscera to prevent Yi Kong from forcefully activating the true yuan in his heart again. Otherwise, once the true yuan dissipated, Yi Kong would die without a doubt. After a few golden lights flashed in front of Yi Kong's chest, Yi Kong slowly raised his head. "The two of you are?" Yi Kong asked Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen in a weak voice. "Jingyi Zhang Xiaoyang. Xuanzhen Yu Xingchen." The two of them replied. Thank you too. Sect Masters." Yi Kong forced himself to speak to the two of them. Yi Kong, appreciate your kindness. You don't have to worry about me, Brother Yi. Don't force yourself at this time," Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yi Kong. "If you continue to forcefully activate your sword technique, you'll be dead before your son dies. You rest well, leave the rest to us," Yu Xingchen said to Yi Kong. "Yi Fan will definitely repay both of you generously." Yi Fan stuttered as he spoke to the two of them. "Both you and your son are seriously injured. There's no need to say more. Rest well," Zhang Xiaoyang said as he and Yu Xingchen helped the two of them to the side to sit down. "Sect Masters, this is?" Gusang Dorji asked in confusion when he saw what the two of them were doing. When the two of them attacked just now, he thought that they were going to kill Yi Fan and his son. He never expected that the two of them were actually there to help them. "Master Gusang, there's a saying in Buddhism that goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-floor pagoda." Zhang Xiaoyang stood up from the ground and faced Gusang Dorji. He said with a smile, "I'd like to do this today." Gusang Dorji's expression changed when he heard that. "Celestial Master Zhang, you're not joking, right?" Tianqian asked Zhang Xiaoyang. "What? Do I look like I'm joking?" Zhang Xiaoyang retorted. "This person is an evil spirit. Everyone has the right to kill him. Sect Master Zhang, as the Jingyi Sect Master, don't tell me you don't know this?" Dikuan narrowed his eyes and asked Zhang Xiaoyang. "Evil spirit?" "Humph," Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. "Then I'd like to ask, what kind of evil did he do? Did he rob by force or bully the people? Did he become an outlaw or commit murder and arson?" "He's the reincarnation of Eldritch. Back then, he killed without restraint and plunged the people into misery and suffering. In this life, he's also fallen into the demonic path. Shouldn't he be killed?" Gusang Dorji asked. "The people who were tortured by this demon back then are right in front of us. How can it be fake? Killed without restraint? Plunged the people into misery and suffering?" Zhang Xiaoyang laughed. "Master, you really dare to say anything. What? Am I wrong?" Gusang Dorji asked with a frown. "Today, all the sect masters are here. Master, you can ask them who Eldritch killed back then," Zhang Xiaoyang said and looked at the other sect masters. Back then, even a 3-year-old child knew that none of the people Eldritch killed were innocent. The sect masters whispered to each other after hearing that. Although they had not experienced Eldritch's era, they had all heard about Eldritch from the previous sect masters. What Zhang Xiaoyang said was not false. Several of the sect masters belonged to sects that had been punished by Eldritch back then. These sect masters wanted to refute Zhang Xiaoyang, but Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were the sect masters of Jingyi and Xuanzhen sect respectively. They were the first and second largest sects in Taoism, so they did not dare to contradict them at all. Gusang Dorji glanced at the crowd and his expression changed slightly. As for these people, oh no, these demons and monsters, Zhang Xiaoyang looked at the enemies around him with a smile and said, their appearance in this demon-slaying conference shows that what Eldritch did back then was righteous. Master, look at them. Which one of them is not evil? Which one of them is not full of evil spirit? Since this is the demon-slaying conference, why don't you get rid of them? You. Gusang Dorji was at a loss for words after being refuted by Zhang Xiaoyang, and could not say a word. Celestial Master Zhang, you're wrong. Seeing that Gusang Dorji was at a loss for words, Tian Qian immediately spoke up to help him. Although most of them are not human, Buddhism says that all living beings are equal. It's not wrong for them to come to this conference. All living beings are equal? Well said. Zhang Xiaoyang looked at Tian Qian. Then I'd like to ask you, Tao Elder. Are the father and son considered as living beings? Should they be equal? This. Tian Qian was speechless after being questioned by Zhang Xiaoyang. Yu Xingqian tried hard not to laugh out loud after seeing Tian Qian and Gusang Dorji's predicament. Although Zhang Xiaoyang was usually addicted to alcohol and scolded people, he was really eloquent when it came to reasoning. No one could compare to him. Everyone knows about what happened to the Yin Yang 8 disciples back then. I don't think I need to say more, right? Zhang Xiaoyang continued. If it weren't for your reputation back then, you would have already transcended the tribulation and ascended, right? How could you have died at the hands of Eldritch? You. Tian Qian pointed at Zhang Xiaoyang angrily. His face was red and his body was trembling. You and I are both cultivators. We both understand the principles of nature. How can you attain the Tao if you cling on to your reputation and hatred? Zhang Xiaoyang said, as for you, Master Gusang, I don't understand. Buddhism emphasizes on expiation. Back when the Buddha attained Buddhahood, the demon king appeared and caused a disturbance. The Buddha did not eliminate him. Since he has joined the demon Tao, why didn't you expiate him? Why did you have to be so ruthless? Could it be that you and Eldritch back then? Zhang Xiaoyang did not elaborate on the rest of his words and just laughed it off. However, no one was a fool. After listening to Zhang Xiaoyang's analysis, it seemed to be true. Everyone in the ritual hall slowly came to their senses. Gusang Dorji's face turned red and white when Zhang Xiaoyang hit the nail on the head. He gripped his staff so tightly that it made cracking sounds. You with the surname Zhang, you insulted the reputation of my 8 sons and slandered the reputation of Master Gusang. How should you be punished? Dikuan could not stand it anymore. He pointed his sword at Zhang Xiaoyang and shouted angrily. Reputation? Do you still care about reputation? Zhang Xiaoyang sneered. Why didn't you think about your reputation when you used your sword to cut off people's arms? Why didn't you think about your reputation when you gouged out people's eyes and tendons? Evil Moon has been trapped by your celestial device. How could you do such a despicable thing? And you even talk about reputation? Suke thought to himself. Bah! The more Zhang Xiaoyang spoke, the more excited he became. He blurted out the word damn. You're talking nonsense. Dikuan was anxious and began to stammer. I'm talking nonsense? Humph! Zhang Xiaoyang continued to sneer. Show everyone your horsetail whisk. Is it stained with Eldritch's blood? Then take out your sword and see if the blood on it is Eldritch. Are the sword marks on Eldritch's arms caused by your sword? You! Dikuan was so angry that his whole body trembled. He could not speak a word. What? Am I right? Zhang Xiaoyang laughed. The crowd began to whisper. They whispered to each other and pointed at Dikuan. Sect leader Zhang, sect leader Yu, it seems that you have to stand up for Eldritch and his son today? Gusang Dorji said coldly with a gloomy face. In front of so many people, he said all kinds of nice words. However, Zhang Xiaoyang did not give him any face at all. This made him really embarrassed. I'm not standing up for them. I'm standing up for the good people, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was dressed in a golden robe, said sternly with his hands behind his back. Since the two sect leaders are so stubborn, then this old monk will offend you, Gusang Dorji said with narrowed eyes. He pointed the staff in his hand at Yi Fan and his son again. Everyone, listen up. Today, we must get rid of this demon no matter what. If anyone tries to stop us, kill them. Whoosh! With Gusang Dorji's order again, the enemies who had been suppressing their anger attacked again. This time, they did not attack from a distance. Instead, they used their movement skills and rushed forward. Wu! Black wind blew. The gloomy atmosphere was gloomy. Demons roared and ghosts wailed. The entire execution field was filled with a foul atmosphere. These enemies all had at least 300 years of cultivation. They were far from ordinary masters. They immediately used their killing moves. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian stood on the left and right of Yi Fan and his son respectively. Their expressions were solemn and their eyes were like torches. Chapter 6:17. Swoosh. 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 Over 300 enemies transformed into over 300 silhouettes, roaring and hissing as they darted straight to the four people in the center of the execution field. Yikong saw this and instinctively wanted to fight with his sword. However, his vital energy was depleted and his acupuncture points were sealed by Yu Xingqian. There was no way he could fight with the enemies. Even standing up took a lot of effort. Feeling helpless, Yikong hugged the armless Yi Fan tightly in his arms. Even if he had no vital energy left, he had to protect his beloved son with his own body. Old Yu, let's fight to our heart's content today. After this, I'll treat you to a drink at the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Zhang Xiaoyang said to Yu Xingqian. Then I'll have to order a few dishes and make you bleed. Yu Xingqian said with a smile. Ha ha! Don't worry, just close your eyes. At most, I'll perform a few more rituals for others. Zhang Xiaoyang laughed loudly. As the two of them spoke, they stood with their backs facing each other. Their eyes were alert and their ears were alert. At the same time, they activated the spiritual energy in their bodies. Boom! Zhang Xiaoyang's hair stood up and golden light burst out from his body. Boom! Yu Xingqian's robe fluttered and golden light enveloped his body. Two huge golden balls of light instantly appeared on the two of them, and quickly merged into one, forming a huge golden taiji ball of light. The light ball was 6 feet in size and had a clear yin and yang. The golden light dazzled and spun continuously. It was very beautiful. Yikong and his son were enveloped by this golden Tai Chi light ball. The moment the Taiji light ball appeared, the 300 or so shadowy figures also rushed to the front of the light ball. They were less than 3 feet away from the light ball. After the previous lesson, the enemies used their trump card this time. Ah! The evil spirits let out horrifying howls. They activated the strong black wind and evil power, transforming into ferocious-looking evil spirits. They grabbed the golden Taiji light ball with their hands, which were covered in sharp nails. Kill! The mountain spirits and wild monsters also let out a soul-shaking roar. All kinds of 5-colored brilliance appeared around their bodies. The brilliance was in all kinds of shapes and forms, and there were all kinds of them. Some were fierce tigers, some were strange snakes, some were centipedes, and some were giant spiders. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, and they were full of murderous intent. In order to successfully kill Eldritch, they no longer cared about their appearances and revealed their true forms. Hundreds of years of hatred caused them to instantly go crazy. They wanted nothing more than to skin Eldritch alive, drink his blood, chew his bones, and eat his flesh. The huge encirclement was rapidly shrinking. Man follows the earth, and the earth follows the heavens. Zhang Xiaoyang said loudly as he circulated his spiritual energy. The Tao of heaven, the Tao of nature. Yu Xingqian roared, his Taoist robes fluttering in the wind. As the two of them spoke, they fiercely circulated the spirit chi in their bodies. As the spiritual energy of the two of them went on a rampage, the dazzling and spinning golden Taiji light ball suddenly shone brightly and grew 3 feet taller. Outside the Taiji light sphere, 8 golden light symbols appeared. Qian, Kun, Zhen, Sun, Kan, Li, Zhen, Dui. The 8 golden light symbols shone brightly and connected to each other, forming a huge golden 8 trigrams diagram. The Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation suddenly appeared. The explosively expanding golden light instantly collided with the 300-plus enemies that were charging at them at high speed. Boom! 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 Black gas burst forth, mixed lights flew everywhere, the earth shook, and the air waves spread in all directions. The Taiji Yin-Yang and Yu Xingchen's Taiji 8 trigrams formation forcibly withstood the all-out attack of the 300-plus enemies. Buzz! 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 The 300-plus enemies pressed their palms against the huge, spinning light sphere and resisted with all their might. At the intersection between the 2 palms and the Taiji light sphere, golden light shot out in all directions, and mixed lights danced and sizzled. The enemies gritted their teeth and circulated their own original spirits with all their might. However, even though they resisted with all their might, Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen's golden Taiji light sphere remained motionless and continued to spin. This scene made all the sect masters present dumbfounded and tongue-tied. The Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation was one of the most basic array formations in Taoism, and was also a must-learn array formation in Taoism. From the sect masters to the disciples who had just entered Taoism, it could be easily captured. It could be said that as long as one was a Taoist, almost everyone would be able to use this array formation. However, this was the first time they had seen someone who could use this array formation to such a level. One had to know that the 1,000 Ghosts array that was set up at Sisui River was actually activated by the Khanate 8 trigrams formation. And this Khanate 8 trigrams formation was almost no different from the Taiji 8 trigrams formation that Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen had used together. The array formation that could barely be activated by 10 top-notch Taoist experts was actually easily activated by the two of them. It was even more powerful than the Khanate 8 trigrams formation back then. The essence of the two's Taoist techniques and the strength of their spiritual qi were far beyond their imagination. If the sect masters hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it even if they were beaten to death. They weren't the only ones who were shocked. Lu Yuanshan and the old eunuch beside the crown prince, as well as Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki beside Matsumoto Takeyoshi, all had a drastic change of expression when they saw this. Lu Yuanshan's expression was solemn as he frowned slightly. Although he and Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were like fire and water, in all honesty, the two's Taoist techniques had indeed reached the pinnacle of perfection. Their casual attacks were strong and powerful, and their power was bouffon. They could easily block these experts in one move. Speaking of which, these experts were indeed not simple. In the face of such a profound Taiji Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation, they could still maintain their figures without retreating. Without some real ability, it was impossible to do so. If it were other ghosts or demons, they would have been destroyed and their souls scattered before they could even touch this array formation. Looking at the dazzling golden light in the array formation, the old eunuch beside the crown prince's face changed slightly, and his eyes narrowed slightly. It was said that Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen of the Chuanjin sect were fooling around all day, drinking and gambling. They didn't do their jobs and neglected the sect's affairs. Now it seemed that they were simply following the crowd and were full of nonsense. Although the two's personalities were polar opposites, they were extremely tacit partners. Not only that, but the two's Taoist attainments also made him admire them from the bottom of his heart. As the saying goes, a small hermit hides in the mountains, while a great hermit hides in the city. On the surface, the two's actions seemed strange and unconventional. They shuttled between mountains and rivers and went to and fro wine shops all day long. But in fact, they didn't show their true colors. It could be said that it was the fortune of Taoism and the blessing of the people to have these two experts in Taoism. Miyamoto Akichi and Sasaki looked at each other, and then slowly turned their heads. When they were in Dongying, they often heard that there were many experts and capable people in the Central Plains. At first, they didn't take it seriously and only thought that it was an alarmist rumor. Now that they saw it, they didn't think so anymore. The profound cultivation of their enemies, the 8 trigrams formation of the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, Gesang Doji's golden Buddha treasure bowl, Yikong's ethereal swordsmanship, Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen's exquisite Taoist skills were really eye-opening and amazing. What they were most interested in was Yi Fan, who was so young but possessed such a heaven-defying cultivation. Since the two of them came to the Great Ming Dynasty, they had been keeping a low profile outside, and had never seen Yi Fan use his skills. They had only heard about it from other ninjas. One move killed hundreds of ninjas, one move razed the 100-year-old Zhou mansion to the ground, one move took the life of Inchan Daxiong, one move defeated several experts and cut the warship, and one move seriously injured the unfathomable cyan-robed envoy. To be honest, if Matsumoto Takeyoshi hadn't said it himself, the two of them wouldn't have believed that these incredible things were done by the young man in front of them who had lost both his eyes and arms. If this person didn't die this time, they would find a chance to spar with him in the future to see if he was as powerful as the rumors said. The two of them thought to themselves. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was still calm. The situation in the execution field made it impossible for him to make a judgment. He didn't know which side would win and which side would lose, so naturally, he couldn't make a final decision. But he was sure that this time, he didn't come in vain, and he gained a lot. If Yi Fan died, then Yi Kong and the Yi family wouldn't be any better. If they didn't die, they would be injured. In this way, not only did he get rid of a fated enemy, but he also got the help of his enemies, the 8 masters of Yin and Yang and Gesang Doji. If Yi Fan didn't die, he didn't lose anything. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen saw injustice and helped, so they would naturally become friends with the Yi family. In this way, as long as he used the true soul of Fujiwara no Chiko to control Yi Fan, he would indirectly control the Zhengyi sect and the Chuanjin sect. All in all, this was a profitable deal. Thinking of this, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face showed a smile. In the execution field, both sides were in a deadlock. The enemies didn't break through Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen's Taiji light ball, but they didn't take a step back either. As the saying goes, many hands make light work. If they were to fight alone, they definitely wouldn't be a match for these two. However, there were hundreds of them, and their combined cultivation had reached 10,000 years. In this way, even if the other party was from the orthodox Taoism, and they were demons and demons, they still had nothing to fear. Seeing this deadlock situation, the other sect masters looked at each other, not knowing if they should help Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, or help their enemies. Help Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen? No. This was the demon-slaying conference, and it was a fact that Yi Kong's son had joined the demon Dao. If they helped them, wouldn't they be helping the demon? Moreover, they would offend the Buddha realm because of this? Help Eldritch's enemies? Even worse. Although Eldritch was very ruthless in the past, he abhorred evil and killed those who deserved to die. Moreover, these enemies were all demons and demons. If they helped them, wouldn't they be helping the evildoers? Moreover, if they helped them, they would offend the righteous sect, Chuanjin sect, and the Yi clan. How would they survive in the Taoism in the future? After thinking for a while, the sect masters came to a decision. They would turn a blind eye and turn a deaf ear. In this way they wouldn't help either side, and they wouldn't offend either side. Moreover, they were here to participate in the demon-slaying conference, not to fight. Who was right and who was wrong had nothing to do with them. Motherf***, If I had the Heavenly Master's sword, these bastards would have gone to hell. Within the Taiji light ball, Zhang Xiaoyang cursed. The Heavenly Master's sword was the treasured sword of the Dragon Tiger Mountains sect masters. It was extremely powerful. Zhang Xiaoyang was often not in the sect and always felt that it was inconvenient to carry it around, so he never brought it with him. Stop complaining, Yu Xingchen said to Zhang Xiaoyang as he activated the Taiji light ball. Now that you know you didn't bring your treasured sword, why didn't you bring it earlier? Stop talking about me. Didn't you also forget to bring your azure light sword? Zhang Xiaoyang jokingly scolded Yu Xingchen. The two of them were always like this. No matter what, they would always bicker. Next, it's our turn. Tian Qian, who had been watching the battle coldly, said with a smile and slowly walked out. Big brother is right. Di Kun chimed in and walked out. He had been waiting for Tian Qian to say this for a long time. Zhang Xiaoyang's words just now made him lose face, so he had been holding a grudge. The other 6 understood tacitly and slowly walked out. Now that both sides were in a deadlock, it was time for them to benefit. Today, the Yin-Yang 8 disciples will enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. First, we'll kill the evil spirit, then we'll get rid of you 2 scums of Taoism. As Tian Qian spoke, he pulled out the treasured sword on his back and charged towards the Taiji light ball. Swoosh! 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 Seeing that Tian Qian had made his move, the remaining 7 disciples pulled out their treasured swords and tapped the ground with their toes. They activated their spirit qi and pointed their swords at Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, who were in the Taiji light ball. The 8 swords, which were as dazzling as frost and snow, pierced towards the Tai Chi light ball in unison. Old Yu, hold on for me. Zhang Xiaoyang opened his eyes wide and roared as he activated his spirit qi. Yu Xingchen kept his mouth shut and activated his spirit qi to the maximum. Although the 2 of them looked down on the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, they knew that the 8 of them did not have an undeserved reputation. Buzz, as the 2 of them increased their spirit qi, the Taiji light ball expanded by another 3 feet. Tian Qian, who was in midair, smirked. This time, Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen would definitely die. One had to know that the Yin-Yang 8 disciples were not those useless pawns, but orthodox Taoism. In the blink of an eye, the 8 swords emitting golden spirit qi charged towards the golden Taiji light ball. The tips of the swords had already touched the Taiji light ball. Whoosh! At this moment, a huge pure white arc of light descended from the sky and struck the swords in the Yin-Yang 8 disciples' hands. Bang! 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 The swords in the Yin-Yang 8 disciples' hands broke apart and fell to the ground. The 8 of them immediately stopped in their tracks and looked towards the sky. They saw a white-robed Yi Yun and a furious Yi Chen descending from the sky. Chapter 6:18. Whoosh! After the white arc of light broke the 8 swords in the hands of the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, its power did not decrease, and it went straight for the enemies of the Eldritch. The enemies of the Eldritch who were dealing with the Tai Chi light ball with all their strength did not dare to be slow. They immediately used their movement techniques to escape from the Tai Chi light ball. Boom! The light arc directly hit the ground of the execution field. Broken stones flew everywhere and the air waves surged. A huge ditch of 7 to 8 feet long and half a foot deep appeared on the hard rock ground. As the enemies left the Tai Chi light ball, a gap appeared in the power of the siege. The stalemate of power was broken in an instant. Bang! 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 More than a dozen enemies withdrew their forces, and Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen had already raised their spiritual energy to a very high level. The remaining enemies were instantly knocked back by the golden Taiji light ball that was expanding rapidly, and they were sent flying backward. The second siege failed again. Whoosh! Whoosh! Yi Yun, who held the snow-thread sword, and Yi Chen, who had an angry expression, landed on the ground. Boom! 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 33 tall, golden bronze men landed on the ground with a loud boom. The two of them waited for a long time below the Feishua peak when they did not see Yikong send a signal. Then, they saw the explosion of golden light on the mountain peak. They knew that Yikong had already fought with the enemy. So, they brought the 33 bronze men and used their movement techniques to go up to Feishua peak. The soles and legs of these 33 bronze statues were equipped with delicate jumping mechanisms. They were extremely powerful. Although each bronze statue weighed over 500 kilograms, and with the heavy weapons they carried, they could weigh over 600 kilograms. However, with the delicate springs that could carry over 1,000 kilograms of force, they could still leap over 100 feet into the air. The power of the bronze men could be seen. It was Yi Yun and Yi Chen. And the bronze men. They were all here. The crown prince was delighted. He guessed that Yikong would not come alone. Yi Yun and Yi Chen would definitely come as well. But he never thought that they would bring the bronze men. These 30-odd bronze men were extremely tall, reaching up to 10 feet tall. They were covered in bronze armor, and even their faces were covered with chainmail woven from fine bronze. Looking at the weapons they brought, it was even more shocking. These bronze men were equipped with a complete set of weapons. They held long spears in their hands, long swords at their waists, crossbows and quiver on their back. Inside the quiver, nearly 1,000 arrows were densely packed. However, this wasn't much. What was most inconceivable was that the eyes of these bronze men, which were twice the height of a normal person, were flashing with blue flames. They were like the wisps, causing people to tremble in fear. What a group of bronze men! The crown prince could not help but exclaimed in his heart. If they had such an army of bronze men, Matsumoto Takeyoshi and his ninjas would be like ants trying to shake a tree, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The crown prince was not the only one who was shocked. In the execution field, other than the Yi family, all the enemies, the sect leaders, and the thousands of spectators were all stunned by the scene in front of them. Even Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian were inexplicably shocked and did not dare to believe it. They were shocked by Yi Yun's majestic sword energy and the dozens of bronze men of the Yi family. The rumor that the Yi family had bronze men had been circulating in Jianghu, and it was said to be miraculous. But even so, no one had seen the real bronze men. So they had always thought that it was a false rumor with exaggerated details. Now that they had seen it, it was as the rumor said. Not only were there bronze men protecting them, there were dozens of them. This time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression became ugly. He was not surprised by the exciting fight just now, but now he was frowning with worry at the appearance of the bronze men. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had always been far-sighted when looking at problems. He was not a short-sighted person. The appearance of the bronze men allowed him to predict the future battles on the battlefield. From the movements of the bronze men and the weapons they carried, the strength of the bronze men was not something that ordinary mechanisms could compare to. The design of the bronze men was exquisite and the construction was precise. It could be said to be a work of art that surpassed the heavens. Once the bronze men were mass-produced and formed into an army, what would the result be if they were placed on the battlefield? Originally, he had thought that only the Yi family's weapon forging manual could catch his eye. Now it seemed that the value of the bronze men was no less than the weapon forging manual. Once he mastered the method of forging the bronze men, it was like having a magnificent army. No, it was far superior to a magnificent army. Fan Air. Konger. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was thinking of a plan when Yi Yun, who was holding the snow thread sword, roared and quickly walked in front of Yi Kong and Yi Fan. Looking at his only son, Yi Kong, who had exhausted all of his vitality and was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, and his grandson, Yi Fan, who was no longer in a human shape, Yi Yun, who was over 50 years old, trembled as tears streamed down his face. The suffering of his beloved son and grandson made him feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was an indescribable pain. Big brother! Nephew! Yi Chen, who was full of anger, also quickly walked in front of Yi Fan and his son, crying as he shouted. The tragic scene in front of him made him almost unable to believe his eyes. Father! Little brother Chen! Yi Kong said with difficulty. Grandfather! Uncle! Uncle Chen! Yi Fan, who had lost both his arms, heard the voices of the two people. He raised his head and looked at them with a pair of bloody holes and said weakly. Yi Yun and Yi Chen were in so much pain that they could not say a word. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen saw that the people from the Yi clan had arrived, and they were slightly relieved. From the conversation, these two people were the head of the Yi clan, Snow Thread Sword Yi Yun, and the former assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Absolute Pin Needle Yi Chen, who was proficient in the art of divination and the ability to gather information. With the help of the two of them, their chances of victory had increased by a few %. Yi Yun is extremely grateful for the help of the two sect masters. Yi Yun, whose eyes were red, stood up and bowed to Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen. Without the two of them, Yi Yun would have lost his only son and grandson, and he would have to send his son off. Yi Chen also stood up and bowed deeply to the two of them. Old hero Yi, how could we dare to receive such a great bow from you? Zhang Xiaoyang saw Yi Yun bowing to him and hurriedly reached out to help him up. As the head of the Yi clan, Yi Yun had an extremely high status in the Jianghu. Moreover, Yi Yun was benevolent and generous, and did not care about trifles. He was deeply respected by the people of the Jianghu. If not for the upheaval that had befallen the Yi clan, even the sect masters in the execution field would have to be respectful to him. Assistant Minister Yi, please rise, Yu Xingchen said as he helped Yi Chen up. Although Yi Chen was not as famous as Yi Yun or Yi Kong in the Jianghu, he was extremely famous among the common people. During his time as an official in the court, he was clean and honest, and loved the people as if they were his own children. He would often use his official position and the influence of the Yi clan to help the poor people redress their grievances and solve their problems. If there is injustice to be redressed, there is an assistant minister Yi in the court. This was a popular saying among the common people, and it was referring to Yi Chen. You are the head of the Yi clan, Yi. Tianqian saw Yi Yun break the swords in the hands of the 8 yin-yang masters and immediately asked with narrowed eyes. Who would have thought that before he could say the word Yun, a huge sword arc with a white light slashed toward him. Whoosh! The arc of light was 30 feet long, and it was as bright as snow. The white light shot into the eyes with a clanging sound. What a fast sword! The head of the Yi clan had made his move. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were secretly shocked. The two of them did not even have time to see how Yi Yun swung his sword. They only saw a white light flash beside them, and the huge arc of sword qi whistled toward Tianqian like lightning. The majestic sword qi from the snow thread sword slashed across the ground and instantly reached Tianqian, who was 30 feet away. The dazzling white light illuminated Tianqian's terrified face. He had heard of the Yi clan's weapon forging manual, and he knew that the manual not only contained supreme techniques for forging divine weapons, but also unfathomable sword qi cultivation methods. However, he did not expect Yi Yun's sword to be so fast. It was so fast that he did not even see how his opponent made his move. It was no wonder that Tianqian was the head of the 8 yin-yang masters. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. In a flash, he gathered spiritual energy in his palms and abruptly formed a 3 feet thick golden semicircle qi shield in front of him. The qi shield shone with a dazzling golden light and trembled slightly, covering the entire area in front of him. When Di Kuan saw this, he felt as if a rock had been lifted from his heart. Tianqian was the head of the 8 yin-yang masters. His Dao skills were far superior to his, and his spiritual energy cultivation was unfathomable. As long as Tian Qian's qi shield was released, it did not matter if it was a rain of swords or arrows, it would be nothing. However, he was wrong. If it was another sword qi expert, his analysis would not be wrong. However, the one who made the move this time was none other than Yi Yun, the head of the Yi family, Snowthread Sword Yi Yun. This person's sword qi was not as simple as he thought. Everyone who cultivated sword qi understood one principle. In order to unleash the full power of a sword move, there were three most important points. First, divine weapon. Second, sword qi cultivation. Third, mind and spirit as one. Only with the strongest divine weapon and the strongest sword qi cultivation could one unleash the full power of a sword move by reaching the realm of man and sword as one. And Yi Yun already possessed all three of these points. Let's talk about divine weapon first. The snowthread sword in Yi Yun's hand was completely different from Yi Fan's cold dragon leaving fire and Yi Kong's inverse scale sword. Cold dragon leaving fire was a spiritual sword. One was cold and the other was hot, and its spiritual might was tyrannical. Yi Kong's inverse scale sword was blazing with yang qi, and its might was tyrannical. However, Yi Yun's snowthread sword only had one word, and that was power. Using the secret method in the armament forging manual to forge the snowthread sword for 3 years, it was born with sword qi. On the day the sword was forged, a white light would burst out from the sword furnace and continue for 3 days. This sword was definitely worthy of being called a divine weapon. The second point was sword qi cultivation. Before Yi Yun met sword immortal Yi Feng, he was already an expert in sword qi. The sword qi in the armament forging manual had been cultivated to perfection by him. After receiving Yi Feng's guidance, his sword qi cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. During his time in the Mongolian Empire, Yi Yun had been studying the sword immortal mantra that Yi Feng had taught him day and night. He had already grasped the basics. Not only did his sword qi cultivation increase dramatically, it was also 10 times sharper than before. As for the third point, mind and spirit as one, there was no need to even mention it. His beloved son, Yi Kong, and beloved grandson, Yi Fan, had suffered so much that there was only one word in his mind right now: revenge. The concentrated killing intent cleared his mind of all distractions, and mind and spirit as one. Divine weapon, snowthread sword immortal, mind and spirit as one. Yi Yun's sword move was already close to perfection. Swoosh! The huge white sword arc was like light and lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it went straight for Tian Qian. Boom! The white light flashed past, and golden light burst forth. Following a loud noise, the 3-foot golden spiritual energy barrier in front of Tian Qian was instantly split open by Yi Yun's majestic sword qi as if it was tofu. Bang! The golden spiritual energy barrier was instantly split into 2. Tian Qian's expression changed drastically. The remaining 7 sons were dumbfounded. The powerful golden spiritual energy barrier was so weak in front of Yi Yun's sword qi. However, this was not the end. After the dazzling white sword arc pierced through the 3-foot thick spiritual energy barrier, its power did not diminish as it went straight for Tian Qian's face. Chapter 619. Boom! Under the incredulous gazes of the experts, the blazing white and majestic sword qi instantly struck Tian Qian's chest. Tian Qian was instantly engulfed by the dazzling white light. Bang! Under the powerful impact of the snowy sword arcs, the shocked heavenly Qian arched his body and flew backwards, crashing into a giant rock 70 feet behind him at high speed. Boom! Tian Qian's body spread out and instantly crashed into the solid rock that was more than 30 feet tall. It was as if he was embedded in it. Whoosh! Before they could recover from their shock, Yi Yun's second sword arc appeared once more. However, A dazzling white sword arc appeared in the blink of an eye and slashed towards Tianqian, who was embedded in the boulder. This sword chi was almost twice the size of the previous one. It was 50 feet long and dazzling. It was so fast that it made a sharp sound. Whoosh! While the crowd was still in shock, Yi Yun made his move. With the dazzling snow sword in his hand, he executed his sword chi movement skill and turned into a white shadow. He followed closely behind the sword chi and went straight for Tianqian. Yi Yun did not make a move, but he did make 3 consecutive moves. He wanted to personally cut this sanctimonious leader of the 8 yin-yang elites in half. Yi Yun's movement skill was so fast that it was not slower than the sword chi. When the second sword chi hit Tianqian's chest, Yi Yun's dazzling snow sword also slashed down at the same time. Boom! A loud sound was heard as the white light danced and the airwaves dispersed. Bang! Under the impact of Yi Yun's 2 sword chis, the huge rock that Tianqian was embedded in exploded into countless rock fragments. Crash! Rock fragments fell from the sky as if it was raining rocks. From the time Yi Yun executed the first sword chi to when Yi Yun executed his movement skill and hit Tianqian, it was only a blink of an eye. Yi Yun's sword chi cultivation was so high that it was obvious. The experts were stunned. They had never seen such a domineering sword chi cultivation. The execution field was strangely quiet. What a fast sword! What a fast sword! Zhang Xiaoyang's eyes widened as he looked at the stone rain and the smoke-like stone mist in front of him. This Yi Yun was indeed worthy of being the head of the Yi clan. His attack was so earth-shattering. This time, Tianqian was dead for sure. No matter who it was, there was no chance of survival after receiving 3 consecutive strikes from Yi Yun's snow thread sword. Yu Xingqian was also secretly impressed by Yi Yun's sword chi cultivation. One had to know that Yi Yun was over 50 years old at this time. He was already in his prime. To be able to release such a majestic sword chi and display such an astonishing movement technique at such a young age was simply inconceivable. Big brother! Di Kun, who had regained his senses, shouted towards the stone fog that filled the sky. Big brother! Big brother! The remaining 6 also cried out involuntarily. Tianqian, who was still full of vigor just a moment ago, had been slashed 3 times in the blink of an eye. They simply could not accept this. The crown prince sneered. This time, their big brother had probably been slashed into several pieces by Yi Yun's snow thread sword. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression was cold as he quietly observed the situation in the execution field. He would definitely not give the order to attack before the outcome was decided. Whoosh! A cold wind blew past. The dust in the execution field was instantly blown away by this cold wind. When Yi Yun and Tianqian's figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes, everyone let out a gasp of surprise. They could not believe the scene in front of them. Tianqian had used his sleeves to block Yi Yun's snow thread sword that was emitting white light. How was that possible? Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian were instantly dumbfounded. They had seen Yi Yun's unparalleled sword chi with their own eyes. Logically speaking, Tianqian should have died on the spot. How could he block Yi Yun's attack with just his sleeves? The crown prince's mouth was slightly agape in shock. Like Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingqian, he was also in disbelief at the scene in front of him. He could not figure it out. Lu Yuanshan frowned with a puzzled expression. The 8 yin-yang disciples belonged to the same sect as him. He knew very well how high their cultivation was. As the leader of the 8 yin-yang disciples, Tianqian's cultivation was indeed extraordinary. However, it was definitely not to the extent where he could block 3 of Yi Yun's majestic sword chi with just his sleeves. There must be something fishy about this. Your Highness, the black robe he's wearing is definitely not simple, the old eunuch whispered to the crown prince. The moment the old eunuch said that, the crown prince and Lu Yuanshan were instantly enlightened. It turned out that it was not Tianqian's cultivation that had blocked Yi Yun's sword chi, but his black robe. The old eunuch was right. The reason why Tianqian was able to block Yi Yun's 3 major sword qi was not because of his cultivation. It was because he was wearing the demonic realm's secret treasure that he had snatched from Yi Fan, the 8 treasures robe. This robe was one of the demonic realm's secret treasures. It was invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. It was not inferior to the flawless Taoist robe that the white-robed sky dragon had given to Yi Fan. Not to mention Yi Yun's sword qi, even the Zenith Heaven Immortal's immortal technique would not be able to damage it. At this moment, the flawless Taoist robe was worn by Fujiwara no Chiko, and the 8 treasures robe had been snatched away by Tianqian. It was because of this that Yi Fan's arms were chopped off, and Tianqian was able to survive Yi Yun's sword qi. There must be something wrong with his black robe. Yu Xingqian said to Zhang Xiaoyang with a frown after carefully observing Tianqian with his heaven's eye. Under his heaven's eye, Tianqian's gold-threaded black robe was filled with spiritual energy, and it shone brightly. It was obviously not an ordinary item. Zhang Xiaoyang frowned. My 2 benefactors. Yi Fan said weakly to the 2 of them, the black robe he is wearing was stolen from me. You must be. Be careful. No wonder. Yu Xingqian nodded with a serious expression. Despicable and shameless dog. Zhang Xiaoyang cursed as soon as he heard Yi Fan's words. This robe could easily block Yi Yun's unparalleled sword qi. It seemed that it would not be easy to defeat the 8 yin-yang disciples this time. In the center of the execution ground, Yi Yun was using all his strength to activate the snow sword in his hand, and continuously pressed down on Tianqian's raised robe. To be honest, he had not expected Tianqian to remain unscathed under his sword qi attacks, which were faster and stronger than the last. Tianqian had used only one sleeve to receive his full-powered attack. Buzz, the snow sword shone brightly under Yi Yun's control, and sword qi overflowed. However, it was completely ineffective. Tianqian had also witnessed the power of the 8 treasure jade silk robe, and he was secretly cheering in his heart. The moment Yi Yun's snow sword slashed down, Tianqian instinctively raised his sleeve to block. He did not expect that this block would coincidentally save his life. It was indeed a good treasure. Tianqian was overjoyed. He used his right sleeve to block Yi Yun's snow sword while he secretly gathered spiritual energy in his left hand. Buzz, Tianqian's left palm, suddenly shone with golden light. Whoosh! While Yi Yun was holding the sword with both hands and channeling sword qi with all his might, Tianqian's golden left palm instantly slapped toward Yi Yun. Although Yi Yun did not understand how Tianqian could withstand his 3 consecutive attacks so easily, Tianqian's counterattack was still within Yi Yun's expectations. Seeing Tianqian's palm strike, Yi Yun immediately freed his right palm and gathered sword qi in his palm. Buzz, white light shone from Yi Yun's right palm. At the same time, he pushed his palm forward to meet Tianqian's golden palm strike. This time, Tianqian's plan was wrong. His treasured robe could indeed block all attacks, but the prerequisite was that the opponent's attack had to land on the treasured robe. Now that their palms were clashing, the treasured robe was completely useless. He originally thought that Yi Yun's sword qi was powerful and that his palms were definitely weak. However, he was wrong. Yi Yun's sword qi was not only released by the sword and saber. Back in the battle at the Yi family's ancestral home, Yi Yun was already able to unleash sword qi with his bare hands, and he could instantly slash apart buildings made of granite. Now that he had received guidance from the sword immortal, Yi Feng, his sword qi was much purer than before. Smack! When their palms met, there was an earth-shattering sound. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. Yi Yun's sword qi could split Tianqian's 3 feet spiritual energy shield in half, let alone Tianqian's palms. A white light shot out from Yi Yun's palm and instantly pierced through Tianqian's golden light and through his left arm. Swoosh! After the white light pierced through Tianqian's left arm, it instantly shot out from behind his shoulder. Puff! A bloody mist gushed out from the hole that Yi Yun's sword qi had pierced through. Ah! Tianqian let out a blood-curdling scream as his body flew backward and landed heavily on the ground 3 feet away. At this moment, from his left palm all the way to his left shoulder, there was a 3-inch bloody hole that pierced through his entire arm. His left arm could be considered as crippled. "Big brother!" Di Kuan roared as he rushed toward the fallen Tianqian. The other 6 also used their movement techniques and rushed over. "Big brother! Big brother!" Di Kuan helped Tianqian up from the ground and shouted loudly. Tianqian's face was ghastly pale as his left arm drooped down, bleeding profusely. Di Kuan quickly tapped a few acupoints on Tianqian's left arm to stop the bleeding. This scene made all the experts present feel as if they were in a dream. Didn't Tianqian use one sleeve to block Yi Yun's snow thread sword? How did Yi Yun's sword qi pierce through his left arm in the blink of an eye? If he could even block the snow thread sword, how could he not block Yi Yun's palm energy? All the experts could not figure it out. Ha ha! Retribution! Retribution! Zhang Xiaoyang roared with laughter. Yu Xingchen stroked his beard and nodded with a smile. Others did not understand what was going on, but the two of them could not be any clearer. Being too smart for your own good was exactly what people like Tianqian were talking about. "You've cut off 2 of my grandson's arms. There's still one left," Yi Yun said to the Yin-Yang 8 disciples with his sword in one hand. "Yi Yun, I want your life," Di Kuan roared. He turned around and gathered his spiritual energy to activate the horsetail whisk in his hand. One, the soft and smooth tail of the horsetail whisk instantly straightened under his control, and golden light shot out in all directions. One, the other 6 disciples were also enraged as they activated the horsetail whisks in their hands. Chapter 620. Hearing Yi Yun's arrogant words, Di Kuan was infuriated. He swung the tail of the horsetail whisk, which was shining with a golden light, towards Yi Yun and hacked down. Swoosh! A huge golden arc of light shot out from the fly whisk in his hand, heading straight for Yi Yun. The arc of light was 3 feet long, flowing with golden light and surging spiritual energy. Its speed was too fast for the eyes to take in. The enraged Di Kuan used 60% of his spiritual energy. Swoosh! 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 At the same time, the other 6 Yin-Yang 8 disciples made their moves at the same time, swinging the fly whisks in their hands. 7 huge golden arcs of light came from 7 different directions, heading straight for Yi Yun, who was several feet away. The ground of the execution field was instantly illuminated by the 7 golden arcs of light. What powerful spiritual energy! Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were secretly shocked. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples were indeed worthy of their reputation. They had mastered the true teachings of Taoism. If Yi Yun and Yi Chen hadn't appeared in time just now, the Taiji light sphere that the two of them had set up together might very well have been destroyed by the hundreds of enemies that had swarmed over together with the Yin-Yang 8 disciples. Looking at Yi Yun again, seeing the 7 of them attacking at the same time, he smiled and activated the snow sword in his hand. Buzz, under Yi Yun's control, the snow sword instantly shone with a bright white light, and the sword aura surged. It trembled slightly in excitement and buzzed continuously. At this time, Yi Yun's hair and beard were fluttering in the wind. His body was surrounded by sword aura, and the white light shone brightly. It was as if a sword immortal had descended to the mortal world. Around him, a 3 feet wide ball of light with flowing brilliance had already formed. Unlike Yi Kong's ball of light, Yi Yun's ball of light was completely formed by countless sharp sword auras. Swoosh! The 7 golden arcs of light were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they were less than 3 feet away from Yi Yun's ball of light. Overconfident, Lu Yuanshan, who was standing beside the crown prince, thought to himself, Tianqian's spirit qi cultivation was far above the 7 of them, but in the end, he was still instantly destroyed by Yi Yun's sword qi. The 7 of them seemed to have incomparable power, but in reality, it was flashy without substance. It was completely unable to pose any threat to Yi Yun. This time, the 7 of them would most likely lose an arm or a leg. Lu Yuanshan was not the only one with such thoughts. Zhang Xiaoyang, Yu Xingqian, Sasaki, Miyamoto Akichi, the old eunuch, as well as the various enemies and sect leaders, all believed that the 8 yin-yang disciples were going to suffer this time. Even the head of the 8 scions was not a match for Yi Yun, let alone the others. The 8 yin-yang disciples were bound to lose this battle. However, what happened next caused everyone's expression to change drastically. Swish, 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 when the 7 golden arcs of light were less than a meter away from Yi Yun's sword qi light ball, they seemed to have a mind of their own and instantly merged into one. Buzz! The 7 golden arcs of light that were 30 feet long instantly turned into huge golden arcs of light that were 90 feet long and filled with violent spirit qi. The golden arcs of light were extremely dazzling. Like a huge golden machete, they rushed towards Yi Yun's sword qi light ball at a speed that the naked eye could not follow. The 8 yin-yang disciples had cultivated together for many years and were already mentally connected. Naturally, the spirit qi moves they used were also well connected. After seeing Yi Yun use his majestic sword qi to destroy one of Tianqian's arms, the 7 of them did not dare to underestimate Yi Yun anymore. The moment Di Kuan activated his horsetail whisk, the 6 of them understood Di Kuan's intention and attacked together. Combining 7 into 1, they gathered their strength to destroy Yi Yun's sword qi and avenge their elder brother, Tianqian. When Yi Yun saw that the 7 golden arcs of light had merged into one, his expression changed drastically. He did not expect that the cultivation of the 7 of them had actually reached the stage where they were mentally connected and could merge 7 different powers into one. To reach such a stage was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Speed, strength, direction, height, angle, timing of attack, close coordination of timing, and even the rhythm of breathing had to be perfect and flawless. Otherwise, not only would it not increase the power, but it would also cancel each other out. On the contrary, once the different moves were perfectly merged into one, the increase in power was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. The difference in strength between breaking 1 chopstick and breaking 10 chopsticks was not as simple as 10 times. When the 7 of them merged 7 different powers into one, their strength would increase by at least 10 times. Buzz, thinking of this, Yi Yun did not dare to be negligent. With a thought, he activated his sword qi to the maximum and used all his strength to resist the overbearing golden arcs of light that were coming towards him. Just as Yi Yun activated his sword qi, the golden arcs of light that were 90 feet long collided with his sword qi light ball. Boom! A loud sound was heard and air waves spread in all directions. White light splattered and golden light shone brightly. Qi, the huge golden arcs of light cut straight into Yi Yun's sword qi light ball half a foot deep. Yi Yun, who was protected by his sword qi, was pushed back 5 feet by the huge impact of the golden arcs of light. He forcefully stabilized his body and activated his sword qi at the same time as he activated the sword qi on his snow sword to resist the golden arcs of light that cut into the sword qi light ball. At this moment, he did not dare to relax in the slightest. The moment he relaxed, the golden arcs of light would directly pierce through his sword qi light ball and split him into 2 from head to toe. Buzz, Yi Yun's sword qi began to increase explosively. Under Yi Yun's full resistance, the golden arcs of light that were like huge golden machetes gradually stopped. Buzz, 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 the huge golden arcs of light and Yi Yun's sword qi light ball were in a stalemate. Dazzling golden and white arcs of light shot out and sizzled. Yi Yun, today I will make you pay with your blood. Decoin roared crazily. He activated his horsetail whisk again and waved it towards Yi Yun. The remaining 6 people also waved their horsetail whisks and attacked again. Swoosh, the golden light rose again and the golden arcs of light appeared again. The second huge golden arc of light pounced towards Yi Yun. This time, the 7 of them used their spiritual power to the maximum. The golden machete of light was 13 feet long. The golden light was blazing and majestic. This time, they wanted to kill Yi Yun completely and split him into 2. Swoosh, the speed of the second golden arc of light was much faster than the first golden arc of light by several times. In just a moment, the second golden arc of light rushed into Yi Yun's sword chi light ball and merged with the first golden arc of light. "Old you, quick!" In a flash, Zhang Xiaoyang shouted to Xingchen, "Quickly go and help." As he spoke, he prepared to help Yi Yun. The first arc of light was able to cut through Yi Yun's sword chi light ball. After the second arc of light and the first arc of light merged into one, the power was so strong that Yi Yun could not fight against it alone. Yu Xingchen understood and prepared to go together. However, just as the 2 of them were about to use their skills to help, the 300 enemies attacked them again. Swoosh! 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 The enemies struck out with their palms, each using their skills and techniques, each emitting light. More than 300 pairs of palms and more than 600 light pillars shot towards the 2 sect leaders. They saw that the Yin-Yang 8 disciples had the upper hand, so they attacked together to stop Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen from helping. They wanted to delay the 2 of them to ensure that Yi Yun was successfully killed. Yi Kong's primordial qi was depleted, and he no longer had the ability to fight. Although Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen were skilled in Dao, they could only parry the attacks of more than 300 experts without the ability to fight back. This way, as long as Yi Yun was dead, the rest of the matter would be much easier to deal with. The Yin-Yang 8 disciples and their 300 enemies could completely crush Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, and then cut Eldritch and his son into pieces. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen saw that the enemies were attacking again, so they could only activate their vital energy again and use the Yin-Yang 8 trigrams formation again, laying down the golden Tai Chi light ball. Sizzle! 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 More than 600 light pillars shot onto the Tai Chi light ball in unison, causing countless 5-colored light fragments to fly in all directions, making sizzling sounds. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen wanted to help Yi Yun, but they could not leave at all. They looked at Yi Yun's side. Buzz! After the 7 disciples, 2 huge golden arcs merged into one, the golden light suddenly exploded, and the vital energy went berserk. Boom! A white light splashed everywhere, golden light exploded, and the vital energy fluctuated violently. Yi Yun's pure white sword chi light ball was instantly split in half by the dazzling golden arc of light. In the blink of an eye, Yi Yun held the snow sword in his hand horizontally, blocking the impact of the golden arc of light. However, the power of the golden arc of light was too strong. Even though Yi Yun used the snow sword to block it with all his might, his body was still sent flying by the huge impact. Yi Yun only felt a tightness in his chest, a sweet taste in his throat, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. From his 3 consecutive attacks hitting Tianqian, to his palm meeting Tianqian's palm and crippling his arm, from the 7 disciples' joint attack to his sword qi being broken and blood spurting out of his mouth, all of this happened in just a few moments. In this short period of time, he went from victory to defeat, from crushing his opponent to being utterly defeated. It was like ice and fire at the same time. In the execution field, the sect leaders were so shocked by the exciting battle that they could not say a word. They were now in the same situation as Matsumoto Takeyoshi, unable to determine which side was stronger. Head of the family. When Yi Chen saw Yi Yun spurting out blood and flying backward, he immediately used his movement technique and jumped into the air, hugging the heavily injured Yi Yun. "Father!" Yi Kong shouted hoarsely. "Grandfather!" Yi Fan also shouted hoarsely. Although his eyes were destroyed, his hearing was not damaged. Not only did he hear Yi Yun spurting out blood, he also heard Yi Yun's situation from Yi Chen's shout. At this moment, grandfather Yi Yun's injuries were not much better than father Yi Kong's. Old hero Yi, Zhang Xiaoyang, who was in the Taiji light ball, urged his spiritual power to resist the attacks of his enemies as he shouted loudly. Head of the family! Head of the family! Hugging Yi Yun, Yi Chen slowly landed on the ground. His eyes were red as he shook Yi Yun in his arms. Hearing Yi Chen's shout, Yi Yun slowly opened his eyes. Using the snow to support himself, he stood up with great difficulty. His complexion was deathly pale, but his eyes were still incomparably sharp. Churner, the stumbling Yi Yun turned his head and said to Yi Chen, "Use the copper men to take Fan Air and the others away, don't care about me." As he spoke intermittently, blood foam flowed out of his mouth and dripped to the ground. At this moment, he had already resolved to die. The only thing he could do now was to use the Burning Heavens diagram on his back. But at this moment, he was already heavily injured. If he activated the Burning Heavens diagram, not only would he lose 10 years of his life, he might even lose his life because of it. But using one life to exchange for the lives of his beloved son and grandson, it was worth it. "Father!" Yi Kong heard Yi Yun's tone and shouted loudly with red eyes. No one knew his father better than his son. He knew what Yi Yun was thinking better than anyone else. "Uncle Chun, take my father and grandfather away. Don't care about me." Yi Fan shouted hoarsely, "Everything started because of me, so I should be the one to pay for it. I'm now a cripple, I'm not worth it for you to do this. Go. Chunner, take them away now." Yi Yun, with blood dripping from his mouth, glanced at Yi Fan and said to Yi Chen, "Head of the family, you can't do this." Yi Chen's voice was choked with sobs. "I'm now the head of the Yi family, you want to defy orders?" Yi Yun turned his head to look at Yi Chen. "Head of the family." Yi Chen's tears fell like rain. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, who were inside the Tai Chi light sphere, saw this situation and their eyes turned red. Di Kuan sneered and prepared to make another move to completely eliminate the Yi family. "After fighting for so long, you still can't solve the problem. Leave this eldritch's life to me." Just as the 7 of them were about to make a move, a voice came from the sky. The voice was sinister and high-pitched, resonating through the clouds. Everyone immediately looked up to the sky. A large mass of black clouds was rushing towards them from the southeast. Chapter 6:21. The yellow-robed Taoist's appearance caused an uproar inside and outside the execution ground. The thousands of people outside the execution ground stared at the rolling black clouds in the sky, dumbfounded. They felt like they were in a dream. Since they were young, they had only heard of the legendary immortals who could ride the cloud. They had never seen it with their own eyes. Now that they saw someone riding the clouds, they could not take their eyes off him. The onlookers were not the only ones who were shocked. When the experts saw this, they were also shocked. They were all experts with profound cultivation bases and extraordinary movement technique. However, none of them were able to ride the clouds and ride the mist. The cloud riding technique was an immortal art. Ordinary cultivators would never have the chance to see it. Even if they were lucky enough to obtain the immortal art, they would not be able to do it if their body constitution had not reached a certain level. The cold wind in the sky was much stronger than on the ground. Even if they obtained the immortal art and tried to ride the clouds, they would definitely be frozen by the cold air in the sky and die on the spot. Only when one's cultivation and body constitution had reached a certain level, or if they had treasures that could resist the cold air in the sky, could they use the cloud riding technique. Those demons and monsters looked very imposing, but in fact, they were only moving stealthily and floating above the ground. Even the Yin-Yang 8 disciples, Zhang Xiaoyang, Yu Xingchen, and Lu Yuanshan, who were the top Taoist experts, could only ride the wind and fly in the sky. They could not reach the clouds at all. Now that they saw the person riding the black clouds and wearing Taoist robes, the experts could not help but look at him. For this person to be so capable, his cultivation must be very high. He must be extraordinary. Humph, how can a perfected immortal ride the black clouds? Zhang Xiaoyang, who was in the Tai Chi light ball, said coldly. This person is not a good person. Yu Xingchen frowned, his face grave. This person's cultivation was much higher than both of them. If they really fought, even if both of them joined forces, they would not be a match for this person. When the Yin-Yang 8 disciples and their enemies on the ground saw this person, they were first shocked, then delighted. From what this person had said, this person must have an irreconcilable feud with Eldritch. With this person's peerless cultivation, it would be a piece of cake for him to deal with Zhang Xiaoyang, Yu Xingchen, and the others. Whoosh, in the blink of an eye, the rolling black clouds arrived above the execution ground. The Taoist on the black cloud flicked his sleeve and swooped down from the sky with a large black cloud. His apricot-yellow Taoist robe fluttered noisily. Phew! On the execution field, a strong gust of wind blew in reverse. The strength of this person's aura was unprecedented. Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen also dispersed their spiritual power and stood together with the Yi family members, on high alert. Amidst the raging winds, the black cloud carrying the yellow-robed Taoist slowly descended to the ground. The Taoist flicked his sleeves and the black cloud instantly disappeared. Only then did the crowd see the Taoist's appearance clearly. This person was wearing a yellow jade hairpin and an apricot-yellow Taoist robe. There was a Taiji diagram embroidered on his back and a golden sword on his back. He was thin and had an evil smile on his face. His triangular eyes shone brightly and were extremely sharp. Greetings, immortal master. Tian Qian, who had lost one of his arms, slowly walked in front of the Taoist and saluted him with one hand. May I know who you are? The remaining 7 people followed suit and saluted the Taoist. You are the 8 Yin-Yang disciples? The Taoist squinted his eyes and looked at the 8 of them. Yes, the 8 Yin-Yang disciples replied in unison. You are the leader of the 8 disciples, Tian Qian? The Taoist looked at Tian Qian and continued asking. Yes, I am. Tian Qian replied respectfully. As the leader of the 8 disciples, you actually lost one of your arms to an ordinary person. What an embarrassment to the Taoist sect. The yellow-robed Taoist said indifferently. You are right, Taoist master. I am not skilled enough and have brought shame to the Taoist sect. Tian Qian's face alternated between red and white as he lowered his head and said, Since you are honest, I will help you reattach your broken arm, since we are both Taoists and have a grudge against this Eldritch. As the yellow-robed Taoist spoke, he formed a sword with his fingers and pointed at Tian Qian's broken left shoulder. Sigil, a yellow electric light shot out from the yellow-robed Taoist's sword finger and rushed into Tian Qian's arm. Sigil, sizzle, sizzle. After the electric light rushed into Tian Qian's arm, it started to move around his broken arm. Swoosh, as the yellow electric light continued to move around, Tian Qian's broken arm that was already numb gradually regained consciousness. He could even gently close his fingers. He could only feel a strong and domineering spiritual energy gradually filling his left arm. Swoosh, the bloody hole on his left palm started to flash with yellow light and the terrifying wound started to close. Tian Qian raised his arm and looked at his healing arm in disbelief. He could not believe that this was real. This Taoist's cultivation was so high that it was far beyond his imagination. The remaining 7 people were dumbfounded when they saw Tian Qian's arm slowly recovering. This Taoist had just casually pointed his finger and their big brother's broken arm that had been pierced by Yi Yun's sword energy recovered in the blink of an eye. This was the power of an immortal. Sizzle, as Tianqian's arm gradually recovered, the yellow electric light returned to where it came from and flew back into the Taoist's sword finger. The Taoist withdrew his sword finger and looked at Tianqian with a smile. "Thank you, exalted immortal, for restoring my arm." Seeing that his arm had recovered, Tianqian was very grateful. He knelt before the Taoist on one knee and cupped his fist. "Thank you, exalted immortal, for saving my life." The remaining 7 also knelt on the ground and expressed their gratitude. This scene caused everyone present, including Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen, to be dumbstruck and stunned on the spot. Who exactly was this Taoist? How could he have such a powerful technique? "Rise, all of you," the yellow-robed Taoist said. The 8 yin-yang disciples slowly got up. "May I know your name and where is your immortal abode?" Tianqian asked the yellow-robed Taoist respectfully. "All you need to know is that I'm here to kill Eldritch," the Taoist said calmly. "You don't need to ask about anything else." "What? Does Immortal Master also have a grudge against Eldritch?" Tianqian asked anxiously. "Humph," the yellow-robed Taoist sneered and turned to Yi Fan, who was in the center of the execution field. He said through gritted teeth, "Then you'll have to ask him." Yi Fan looked at the yellow-robed Taoist with a cold expression on his face. He heard the yellow-robed Taoist's words clearly. Every word entered his ears. "It seems that you're also here to seek revenge?" Yi Fan asked. "What do you think?" The yellow-robed Taoist looked at Yi Fan with a gaze as sharp as a knife. "Oh? Let's hear it," Yi Fan said to the yellow-robed Taoist with a smile. At this moment, his father Yi Kong's vital energy was exhausted, his grandfather Yi Yun was heavily injured, and Zhang Xiaoyang and Yu Xingchen had used the array twice in a row, so they must have used up a lot of their spirit energy. He had to try his best to use words to delay this new expert, so as to buy time for them to recover and accumulate their spirit energy. Yi Fan. Just as the yellow-robed Taoist was about to speak, a woman's shout came from the entrance of the execution field. Everyone immediately turned to look at the entrance. Whoosh! A red figure rose into the air and flew toward Yi Fan at high speed. The woman's shout made Matsumoto Takeyoshi frown, and Yi Fan's heart feel warm. The woman was none other than Akatsuki. She was originally on the East Sea warship when she accidentally heard about the demon-slaying conference from a ninja who had returned from the mainland. When she heard that the person to be killed in the demon-slaying conference was the reincarnation of Eldritch, Yi Fan, she felt dizzy and almost fainted. No wonder she hadn't seen Yi Fan for several days and the lights on the boat hadn't been turned on. It turned out that something had happened to Yi Fan. She, who had always been calm, didn't care about disobeying orders and rushed to Tibet. Her movement skills were limited, and she was unfamiliar with the place. She traveled day and night and asked around before she finally arrived at the execution field. When she saw Yi Fan in the center of the execution field, Akatsuki's heart was broken. She hated herself. She hated herself for suggesting to part ways with Yi Fan because of some inner conflict. She hated herself for not taking the initiative to search for the cauldron with Yi Fan. If she was by Yi Fan's side, Yi Fan would definitely not be tortured like this. Swoosh! Akatsuki's figure instantly appeared in front of Yi Fan. Yi Fan-kun. Yi Fan-kun. Looking at Yi Fan, who had lost both his arms and eyes, Akatsuki, who was wearing a veil, sobbed. Her veil was instantly drenched. She had never been in such pain since she was young. She wished so much that she could take Yi Fan's place and suffer so that her beloved would be unharmed. Looking at the crying Akatsuki, Yi Kong and Yi Chen vaguely felt that this person was Fujiwara no Chiko. Although she was wearing a veil, her pair of beautiful eyes and ethereal voice were exactly the same as Fujiwara no Chiko. If Yi Yun had not told them that Fujiwara no Chiko had lost her soul, they would have really thought that this person was Fujiwara no Chiko. Hongji. Yi Fan frowned and said, "You. Why are you here?" Akatsuki leaned on Yi Fan's shoulder. Her body trembled and she cried bitterly. She was so heartbroken that she could not make any sound. Brother Yi. Just as everyone was wondering about this woman's identity, another woman's voice sounded again. At the entrance of the execution ground, a young woman with a bundle on her back was crying hysterically as she rushed toward Yi Fan. Yi Fan's heart broke when he heard this. The person who came was none other than his relative from his previous life, the daughter of the Yi family, Yi Feishue. Just like Akatsuki, when she heard that Yi Fan had been restrained and was about to be killed during the demon-slaying conference, she was heartbroken, as if thousands of arrows had pierced her heart. She took advantage of the night when her father was sleeping soundly to pack a simple bundle and set off on the road to Tibet. Along the way, she ate and slept in the open. She rode horses and carriages, crossed mountains and ravines, and hurried day and night. She suffered untold hardships, spent all her traveling expenses, and even pawned her jewelry. Finally, she arrived here within 10 days. Brother Yi! Brother Yi! Yi Feishue rushed to Yi Fan and shouted loudly. She was already sobbing. Some time ago, Yi Fan had personally sent her home and promised to take her to the Lingyun cave to play in the future. In less than a month, Yi Fan had already become unrecognizable. Feishue, why did you come here? Yi Fan, whose face was full of pus and blood blisters, asked Yi Feishue. Ah! Yi Feishue burst into tears. Her tears had already burst out of her eyes. Her heart was in extreme pain. As she cried, she tore off the bundle on her body and crazily poured out all kinds of medicinal ingredients. Ginseng, Ganoderma lucidum, snow lotus, cordyceps, all kinds of precious medicinal ingredients fell to the ground. Yi Feishue picked up one and put down another. In an instant, her spirit collapsed. She threw all the medicinal ingredients aside and burst into tears like a child. Chapter 6:22. Hongji, Feishue, don't be sad anymore. Yi Fan said to Yu Hongji, who was crying on his shoulder, and Yi Feishue, who was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. Am I not still alive? It would have been better if Yi Fan had not said this. After he said this, the two of them cried even harder. Akatsuki's tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. Her eyes were swollen like peaches while Yi Feishue's voice was completely hoarse. Her weeping was like a pear blossom in the rain and her heart was broken. Even though Yi Fan was still alive, he was suffering a fate worse than death as he was being tortured. I didn't expect this gigolo to have such good luck with women. Tianqian sneered as he watched Akatsuki and Yi Feishue cry bitterly in front of Yi Fan. He's no longer a gigolo, Dikuan laughed. Not only is he an ugly freak now, he's also a cripple who can't even stand up. Hee. The remaining 6 looked at each other and smiled. They were now completely relieved. Now that they had compared their powers, they had the absolute advantage. Tianqian's arm had recovered and the yellow-robed Taoist, whose cultivation was unfathomable, had joined the fray. Eldritch would not be able to escape today and would definitely die. Xieyue, it's best if you don't put up a strong front. Just accept your death obediently. Dikuan smiled at Yi Fan. As long as you admit your guilt and submit to the law, no matter if it's your family or friends, they won't be implicated. I can guarantee that they will leave this place safely. However, if you insist on doing things your own way and insist on involving these people, they will only end up dead. Yi Fan remained silent after hearing this. Dikuan was right. If he did not die, his 2 family members, the 2 sect leaders who had helped him, would be in trouble. Even Akatsuki and Yi Feishue would be implicated. The 8 yin-yang disciples and his enemies were far more powerful than his side. Now that the Taoist with unfathomable cultivation had joined the fray, his side was doomed. How is it? Have you thought it through? Seeing that Yi Fan was not speaking, Dikuan asked Yi Fan with a cold smile. Shameless demon, Just as Yi Fan was about to speak, Yu Hongji, whose face was covered in tears, pulled out the saber on her back. She roared as she used her movement skill and quickly flew towards Di Kuan. Whoosh! Akatsuki's figure instantly turned into a red shadow. Its speed was so fast that it arrived 3 feet above Di Kuan's head in an instant. She stepped into the void and raised the saber in her hand above her head. Then, she mobilized the spiritual energy in her body and fiercely activated the saber. Buzz! The saber in Yu Hongji's hand emitted a bright red light under the influence of her spirit energy. It was as red as blood. Whoosh! Akatsuki, with a face full of grief and anger, slashed the sword at Di Kuan's head. This time, Akatsuki was really angry. She had used her movement technique and sword technique to the extreme. Red veil, red battle uniform, red sword, and bloodshot eyes. At this moment, Akatsuki was no longer the ice beauty who kept a low profile. She was a bloody warrior. From the moment she drew her sword to slashing at Di Kuan, Akatsuki had done it in the blink of an eye. Japanese swordsmanship focused on actual combat and effectiveness. They were not like the swordsmanship experts of Middle-earth, who needed to control their chi, adjust their chi, focus their mind, and other complicated preludes before attacking. They only needed one word to describe their moves: speed. Sharp. All the control of one's chi, spirit, movement technique, drawing the sword, and slashing were done in an instant. By the time the opponent reacted, there was no time to resist. This was the power of Japanese sword techniques. However, Akatsuki's sword techniques were far beyond that. Under the guidance of her master, Shuegu Kyoichi, Yu Hongji had mastered an extremely fast blade technique. It was called the Autumn Wind 3 consecutive slashes. There was only one word to describe this technique: fast, extraordinarily fast. How fast was it? In the time it took for a top expert to swing his sword, she could swing it 3 times. In other words, in the time it took for the opponent to swing his sword at her, she had already swung her sword 3 times. One to block the opponent's sword, one to kill the opponent, and the other to return to the scabbard. The speed at which she swung her sword was so fast that she had already sheathed her sword, but the opponent still thought that she had not drawn her sword. What was even more terrifying was that this autumn wind 3 consecutive slashes was not as simple as 3 swings of the sword. The sword aura that it emitted was even more chilling and impossible to guard against. Not only could her sword aura be released from the sword to attack from a distance, but it could also be attached to the sword. If the sword aura was activated, the 4-foot-long sword could extend out an 8-foot-long invisible sword aura. In other words, a 4-foot-long sword could unleash the power of a 10-foot-long sword. Many experts had been defeated by Akatsuki's invisible sword aura. The opponent was still 8 feet away, but the sword aura had already touched the opponent's throat. The invisible sword aura coupled with the shocking sword technique of the Autumn Wind 3 consecutive slashes, the power was unimaginable. Akatsuki's movement technique caused the proud Di Kuan's expression to change drastically. Before he saw how Akatsuki drew her sword was already above his head. In a moment of desperation, Di Kuan did not have time to think. He used his spiritual energy to activate the tail of the horsetail whisk in his hand and raised it, preparing to block Akatsuki's sword. However, he had underestimated the sword in Akatsuki's hand too much. He had also underestimated Akatsuki's sword technique too much. If Akatsuki only had this much ability, Matsumoto Takeyoshi would never invite her all the way from Japan. The name of the sword in her hand was the same as her name. It was also called Hongji. It was a true Japanese divine weapon. The name Akatsuki was actually based on the name of this sword. This sword was 4 feet long and less than 2 inches wide. It was as red as blood and shone brightly. When it was waved, it was like a dancer in red. Hence, it was named Hongji. Akatsuki was an orphan. She was raised by her master, Kogo Kyoichi. When she reached a sensible age, Kogo Kyoichi passed this sword to her. She had heard from Kogo Kyoichi that this sword was completely different from other swords. It was forged by the person who forged it with his own blood mixed with rare meteorite. It was extremely sharp, and its sword aura was invincible. This sword was not as simple as being sharp. It also had a magical characteristic. That was, once this sword was stained with the owner's blood, its power would increase exponentially. When Akatsuki used her movement technique, she had already activated the invisible sword aura of the sword in her hand to more than 8 feet long. She also directly used her unique skill, Autumn Wind 3 consecutive strikes. Of course, Dikuin, who was in a panic, did not know that Akatsuki had such a unique skill. He only instinctively used the tail of the horsetail whisk in his hand to block. Cha! As the blood-red sword slashed down heavily, the flashing golden horsetail whisk in Dikuin's hand was instantly cut in half by the extremely sharp Hong-ji sword. After the horsetail whisk was cut in half, the speed of the sword did not decrease. It did not stop at all and continued to swing down at high speed. Dikuin's pupils constricted instantly. In a moment of desperation, he raised his arms high and prepared to use his bare hands to block the sword. He tried in vain to use his palms to catch Akatsuki's sword that was slashing down at high speed from top to bottom. However, Akatsuki's Autumn Wind 3 consecutive strikes was too fast. Before Dikuin could raise his hands, the blade of the sword was already less than 3 inches away from his head. Dikuin closed his eyes and prepared to die. He did not expect that before he could take revenge, he would die in the hands of a Japanese woman. However, in a split second, the yellow-robed Taoist, who was standing at the side, made his move. His body moved instantly and turned into a yellow light. At the moment when Akatsuki's sword was about to touch Dikuin's scalp, he directly slashed under the sword at high speed. Swoosh! Dikuin, who had closed his eyes and was waiting for his death, instantly disappeared under Akatsuki's sword. Boom! The gravel cracked and the airwaves surged. The dazzling red sword instantly cut a huge trench that was more than 10 feet long and half a foot deep on the rocky ground. The first slash of the Autumn Wind 3 consecutive strikes missed. However, it was not over yet. The Autumn Wind 3 consecutive strikes was not as simple as one move. Seeing that her opponent had disappeared under her sword, Akatsuki did not reduce her speed. She changed her sword's momentum and slashed horizontally. Swoosh! Akatsuki moved with her sword, and her sword moved with her. The red glow of the Red Princess' sword rapidly drew a beautiful arc in the air and swept horizontally. Although Dikuin had been rescued, the other 7 disciples were still there. These people actually used such a vicious method to treat their beloved man. They really deserved to die. As Akatsuki's attack was too sudden and her sword technique was unusually fast, in addition to the fact that Akatsuki's sword energy was extremely special, invisible and formless, the remaining 7 disciples did not realize that Akatsuki's second slash had already slashed towards them. The 7 of them were now less than 5 feet away from Akatsuki, and Akatsuki's sword energy had already reached 8 feet. I'm going to take revenge for Yi Fan with this slash. Akatsuki thought to herself. Trash. The yellow-robed Taoist, who had already moved more than 3 feet away, saw that the remaining 7 disciples were still stunned and immediately cursed in his heart. Although the Yin-Yang 8 disciples' Taoist technique was passable, its movement technique and close-range combat ability were too weak. They had underestimated the Japanese's sword technique. If he did not make a move now, at least 6 out of the 7 of them would die under this Japanese woman's swift sword. As the yellow-robed Taoist thought to himself, he suddenly bent his fingers into a claw and pointed at Tian Qian, who had just recovered his arm and was stunned. He wanted to use Tian Qian's 8 treasures robe to block Akatsuki's sword energy. Swoosh! Heavenly Sky, who was still standing on the spot, did not understand what was going on. His body involuntarily moved toward Yu Hongji's saber. Boom! Akatsuki's invisible sword energy slashed Tianqian's chest. Tianqian's body was instantly sent flying like a kite with a broken string. If the yellow-robed Taoist hadn't used him to block Red Maiden Yu's saber, he might have been able to escape with his treasured clothes. However, the other 6 people weren't so lucky. They would have been cut in half by Red Maiden Yu's saber and died on the spot. In a short moment, the Yin-Yang 8 disciples had managed to survive the Grim Reaper's attack. Swoosh! Tianqian, who had been sent flying, forcefully stabilized himself as his face turned pale. At this moment, he had just recovered from his shock. He could not help but feel a lingering fear when he recalled the dangerous situation just now. Who would have thought that this seemingly weak girl would actually have such a battle prowess? The Japanese's sword technique was really not to be underestimated. Chapter 623. The yellow-robed Taoist moved so fast that he appeared in front of Akatsuki in the blink of an eye. At the same time, he gathered spiritual power in his right palm and slammed it toward Akatsuki. Yu Hongji didn't panic in the face of such a powerful enemy's attack. She calmly fought back. The yellow-robed Taoist was able to save the Yin-Yang 8 disciples in such a short time. His movement was so fast and his spiritual power was so strong that he could be called a master among masters. But then again, her knife skills were not to be trifled with either. Seeing the yellow-robed Taoist's single-palm attack, Red Moon suddenly activated the Red Princess saber in her hand. At the same time, she held the saber with both hands and performed the Autumn Wind 3 consecutive slashes. She quickly chopped down on the Taoist's arm that was already in front of her. Swoosh! The Red Princess saber, which was shining with red light, created a red light curtain from top to bottom. It was as red as blood. At this moment, the yellow-robed Taoist showed a sly smile on his face. Akatsuki's attack was within his expectations. He turned one of his hands with his palm facing up. At the same time, his palm turned into a claw and grabbed the blade of Akatsuki's saber. He wanted to catch her saber with his bare hands. Akatsuki was shocked. Since her debut, it was the first time that someone wanted to catch her saber with his bare hands. Boom! Red light splashed and yellow light burst out. The saber chi was scattered in all directions with a loud bang. The yellow-robed Taoist's palm, which was shining with yellow light, met with Akatsuki's saber, which was shining with red light. According to Akatsuki's original plan, the yellow-robed Taoist's wrist would definitely be cut off and blood would splatter. However, the saber in her hand stopped abruptly, which made her dispel this idea. Her face turned pale and her beautiful eyes widened. The reason was very simple. The yellow-robed Taoist's 5 fingers had grabbed the Red Princess saber's blade in an instant. The scene in front of him made Akatsuki feel that it was impossible. Autumn Wind 3 consecutive slashes, each slash faster than the previous one. The speed of the third slash was even faster than the previous one, as if it was a shadow. Adding on the powerful saber chi that he had activated, as long as the opponent had a physical body, it would be impossible for him to withstand this slash. And this Taoist actually used 5 fingers to easily catch his famous technique. Just as Akatsuki was in disbelief, the yellow-robed Taoist moved. He abruptly pulled the saber in his hand towards himself. Whoosh! Akatsuki was dragged forward by him, and in the blink of an eye, she was in front of the Taoist. The Taoist gripped the edge of the Red Princess saber tightly with his right hand, while he raised his left hand and slapped towards Akatsuki's chest. This move could be said to be extremely vicious and insidious. In such a situation, the opponent only had 2 choices. One was to let go of the saber and dodge, and the other was to take the hit directly. Between the god weapon and the life, one had to give up one. Akatsuki was indeed an elite disciple of a famous sect. In such a dangerous situation, she was able to quickly come up with a plan. In a flash, she raised her legs and put them together. She gathered her true chi and spiritual energy in her legs and kicked towards the yellow-robed Taoist's left palm. Bang! The yellow-robed Taoist's dazzling palm collided with Yu Hongji's feet, which were imbued with spiritual energy, creating a loud noise. The smart Akatsuki used the strength of the opponent's palm and her own feet to fly backwards. At the same time, she suddenly withdrew her saber. Whoosh! The red princess saber that was firmly held was instantly separated from the yellow-robed Taoist's 5 fingers. What an intelligent Japanese expert to be able to come up with such an ingenious way of using the opponent's strength. Looking at Akatsuki, who was flying backwards, the yellow-robed Taoist was a little surprised. Although this woman's spiritual energy cultivation was not high, she had used her lightning-fast saber technique to attack in the crowd and almost took the lives of the 8 yin-yang disciples. Then, she had retreated in an extremely dangerous situation. To be able to do this in the blink of an eye, she was simply a 1-in-a-million expert. All the experts on the scene, including the enemies, were stunned by Akatsuki's demonic saber technique. This Japanese saber technique was straightforward, and it was very smooth. It was simple and clear without any hesitation. It could be said to be a perfect killing technique. Whoosh! Akatsuki, who was holding her saber with one hand, rushed back to Yi Fan's side. "Red Princess, are you okay?" Yi Fan asked Akatsuki. Although he could not see, he could hear the sound of Akatsuki fighting. "I'm fine," Akatsuki choked as she said to Yi Fan. "It's just that I'm too useless. I couldn't help you take revenge, idiot." Yi Fan said weakly, "I'm already a cripple. You don't have to put yourself in danger for me. It's not worth it." Akatsuki's tears fell like rain. "Listen to me and quickly leave this place. Don't worry about me, cough cough cough." Yi Fan coughed as he said to Akatsuki and Yi Feishu. "If we leave together. If we die together," Akatsuki said with tears falling down her face. "We don't want to live together, but we want to die together." Yi Feishu wiped her tears. "Even if we die today, we want to die together." After Yi Fan heard this, he remained silent and cried blood and tears. Yi Fan. Just as the two of them were swearing to die together, an ethereal woman's voice came from the sky. The voice resounded through the clouds. Yi Fan was shocked when he heard this. It was Yumoji. Didn't he ask her to stay in the Devil Realm with Xiao Zhao? Why was she here? There was the Golden Buddha treasure bowl here. If she came here, she would definitely be taken in by the Golden Buddha treasure bowl. Thinking of this, Yi Fan raised his head and looked at the sky. "Moji, go back. This is not a place for you." Yi Fan roared to the sky. After hearing this voice, everyone looked up. High up in the sky, a beautiful woman in purple clothes descended from the sky at high speed. This woman's eyebrows were like crescent moons, eyes like stars, teeth like jade, and skin like cream. She wore a purple robe that fluttered in the wind. Her body was curvaceous, and her long hair swayed in the wind. She was like a fairy descending from the 9 heavens. On his arm, a spirit fox was hugging him. This person was none other than the leader of the 4 guardians of the Devil Realm, Yumoji. Yumoji's appearance stunned everyone in the execution ground. They had never seen such a beautiful woman before. Even the Crown Prince and Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who had seen countless beauties, were shocked by Yumoji. The execution field was silent to the extreme. Swoosh! Yumoji landed in front of Yi Fan in an instant. "Yi Fan!" Yumoji screamed at the top of her lungs. In just 10 days, Yi Fan had been tortured to such an extent that he did not look like a human being anymore. Woo! Baihu jumped down from Yumoji's arms and threw herself into Yi Fan's arms. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks. At this time, it was heartbroken. It was better to die than to live. "Xiao Zhao. This time, Brother Yi won't be able to hug you," Yi Fan said to Baihu, who was sobbing in his arms. The white fox cried incessantly as it wailed. It would rather be the one being tortured. How could this be? How could this be? Yumoji asked Yi Fan in tears. Don't ask so many questions. Take Huanzhao and go back quickly. It's not too late. Yi Fan said to Yumoji. Who injured you to this extent? Yumoji asked Yi Fan with grief in her voice. Buzz, just as Yi Fan was about to urge Yumoji to leave the place, the golden Buddha bowl that was floating above his head suddenly shone with a golden light. The golden light that enveloped Yi Fan immediately covered Yumoji as well. Ugh! Yumoji let out a low and painful cry. Far away, Gesang Duji, who had been calmly observing the execution ground, had a smile on his face. He looked like a villain who had succeeded. When Yumoji first appeared, he already knew that something was wrong. Although this woman was beautiful, she was from the demon realm. There was no need to guess. This person must be here to rescue Eldritch. He was just worrying about how to subdue this demon when Yumoji took the initiative to come to Yi Fan's side. Gesang Duji exclaimed in his heart when he saw this golden opportunity. Chapter 624. Sigh. Yi Fan let out a long sigh from within the golden light. It was one thing for him to suffer here, but now even Yumoji was implicated. It seemed like he was an unlucky person. Buzz, as the golden light from the golden alms bowl grew brighter, green smoke began to rise from Yi Fan and Yumoji's bodies. Ugh! Yi Fan clenched his teeth as the pain was unbearable. Seeing this, Yumoji, whose face was filled with pain, struggled to come to Yi Fan's side. She opened her arms and silently hugged Yi Fan, allowing the golden light above her to shoot at her. Green smoke began to rise from Yumoji's back. She was blocking the Buddha's light for him. Yi Fan was shocked. You silly girl, you will die if you do this. Yi Fan said loudly to Yumoji. It doesn't matter if I die or not. What matters is that you have to live. Yumoji whispered in Yi Fan's ear with a firm voice, Don't forget, you are my husband now. Yi Fan took a deep breath. His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife as tears of blood flowed down his cheek. What did Yi Fan do to have so many women willing to risk their lives for him? Evil fox, do you still remember me? After seeing Baihu, the yellow-robed Taoist was stunned for a moment before his eyes lit up as he asked. Baihu Xiao Zhao was still grieving for Yi Fan. When she heard the yellow-robed Taoist's question, she immediately turned her head around. When she saw the familiar triangular eyes of the yellow-robed Taoist, a fire of anger rose in her heart. This Taoist's eyes were exactly the same as the Taoist who killed her parents hundreds of years ago. It seems like you remember now. The yellow-robed Taoist laughed sinisterly. I didn't expect a beast like you to be adopted by Eldritch and still be alive today. Woo! Baihu bared its teeth and whimpered fiercely at the yellow-robed Taoist. When he said that, Yi Fan, who was enveloped in the golden light, suddenly looked up. Could this Taoist be the yellow-robed Taoist who killed Xiao Zhao's parents? Wasn't he killed by his previous incarnation? Could it be that he had also reincarnated like him? You are the evil Taoist who killed Xiao Zhao's parents. Yi Fan shouted. He he he. The yellow-robed Taoist took a deep breath and said to Yi Fan with a sinister smile, I didn't expect you to still remember this. You're truly a surprise. You killed my sworn sister's parents, stole her inner core, and skinned her. Your crimes are punishable by death. This is intolerable. Yi Fan was burning with anger. Eldritch and I had no grievances in the past. I only killed 2 fox demons, but you cut off my arm, chopped off my head, and skinned me alive. I used the possession technique to regain my physical body and painstakingly cultivated the consummate skill to take revenge. If I don't take revenge today, I'm not a man. The Taoist shouted loudly. After he was killed by Eldritch, he found a corpse that had just died and used the possession technique of the Taoist sect to reincarnate his soul and live on. Since then, He had endured humiliation and concealed his identity. He refined his spiritual chi and studied spells, all for the sake of taking revenge for being skinned alive and beheaded. Xiao Zhao's parents were not fox demons. No. Yi Fan shouted in a hoarse voice. As he spoke, he struggled to stand up. However, the tendons in his legs were injured, so he couldn't stand up. He could only kneel to support his body. Woo! Baihu Xiao Zhao lost control of her emotions when she recalled the tragic scene of her parents being skinned alive and having their inner cores taken away by this Taoist. She roared and pounced towards the yellow-robed Taoist. Now, her body had a protective spiritual chi that Tian Kanzi gave her. She also consumed the bone-changing pill that Matsumoto Takeyoshi gave to Yi Fan, as well as the ginseng, Ganoderma, and other precious herbs that Onijiro, Akatsuki, and Yi Feishue gave her. She had the body of a fox spirit. Naturally, her speed was incomparable to that of an ordinary animal. A white shadow pounced towards the yellow-robed Taoist. When Akatsuki saw Baihu pouncing towards the yellow-robed Taoist, she immediately shouted, "Xiao Zhao." The yellow-robed Taoist's cultivation was extremely high. Even she was no match for him. If Xiao Zhao went to seek revenge, she would be like a lamb walking into a tiger's mouth. However, it was too late. Before Akatsuki could finish her sentence, Baihu had already leaped into the air. She was less than 3 feet away from the yellow-robed Taoist's face. "I've searched high and low for you, only to find you by chance," the yellow-robed Taoist said. He stretched out one of his hands and instantly grabbed the back of Baihu Xiao Zhao's neck. As he squeezed, Xiao Zhao instantly lost all her strength. It glared fiercely at the yellow-robed Taoist with its bloodshot eyes. It bared its teeth, as if it wanted to tear the throat of the yellow-robed Taoist. "Xiao Zhao!" Yi Fan roared. He could die, but he could not let Xiao Zhao suffer any harm. "Today, I'll let you watch how I kill your savior. Then, I'll peel off your skin and flesh, he." The yellow-robed Taoist said to Baihu, who was in his hands, with a sinister smile. As he said that, he looked up at Yi Fan. 2 streams of hot tears flowed out of Baihu's eyes. "Ah!" Yi Fan roared at the sky as he shook his bloody shoulders violently. Yumoji was flung to one side by Yi Fan's movement. "Ha ha! Ha ha!" Looking at Yi Fan's furious but helpless look, the yellow-robed Taoist laughed loudly. "If you dare to lay a finger on them, I'll destroy your body and soul." Just as the yellow-robed Taoist was laughing maniacally, a loud roar came from the sky. The yellow-robed Taoist stopped laughing and looked up with everyone else. Everyone's expression instantly changed when they saw this. High up in the sky, a large group of white, auspicious clouds rolled in from the horizon. The auspicious clouds were as big as 10,000 feet. Above the clouds, hundreds of experts in different attire held weapons and stepped on the auspicious clouds, whistling in the wind. There were 3 people standing in front of the clouds. The little Taoist boy, dressed in a gold-threaded Taoist robe and carrying a sword on his back, was Mingyu. The Tsuaming Hall's faction master, Cui Ziwen, was dressed in a gold-threaded black robe. His eyebrows were as black as ink, and his hair was as sharp as a knife. The Tsuaming Hall's guardian, Succubus, was dressed in black and had an anxious look on his face. Beside the 3 of them, there was a huge red palanquin that was extremely eye-catching. The person sitting in the palanquin was none other than the head of the 5 elements of Pear Blossom Palace, Baihu Xiao Zhao's mentor, Jinchan. The yellow-robed Taoist's expression turned serious. "The time has come, charge." On the peak of the snowy mountain in the distance, the young man in white gave the order to the thousands of battle wolves behind him. As he spoke, his body floated 3 feet above the ground and rushed toward the execution ground. The thick layer of snow was instantly cut open by the airflow caused by his body movement. Roar! After receiving the order from the young man in white, 7 snow wolves as big as horses howled into the sky. Roar! thousands of battle wolves howled in unison, white fog billowed, and their momentum was like a rainbow. Whoosh, you're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.